All right, welcome back to the Nitty Gritty, episode 117. We are so... I don't think I've ever done something for 117 weeks in a row. I've stayed married longer than that.
I mean, technically, we didn't do it in a row.
Well, but you know what I mean. I mean, we've stuck with it, right? For very minimal return.
Yeah.
Other than knowledge and friendship, which has been pretty valuable. Yeah. And I have a feeling we have 2 new friends now.
Yes. 100%.
Anytime where we talk for 30 minutes before we actually start talking on the mics, it's a good sign. They didn't bring treats, though. So, but we'll see how that...
Look at them, look at each other like...
Next
see how
time.
that, you know...
Next time.
Maybe you can make up for it.
Yes.
Because I'm going to send you home with barbecue, so...
That's awesome.
We're going to... we lay it on thick, so you feel... So, yeah, next time you come on,
Done.
it'll be exciting to see what you guys bring.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
You should be excited.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have the 2 beautiful sisters from Let's Talk Sis. Okay, Alexis Bradley, who is married to one of my good BYU football friends, Brandon. You know, I have a funny story about... Hold on, I'll tell you right after.
Okay.
Chante, I'm sorry.
No, it's all good.
I
It's all
talk a
good.
lot about ADHD on here, and you're seeing it in person. So Chante Schwarzenegger is with us. So it's Chante... It's Stutz, not Stutz.
Yeah, Stutz.
Stutzenegger. I wanted to
got
say
it.
like Schwarzenegger, like
You want to say
But
like,
there's-
with like the Terminator
with
accent?
the A, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So Chante Stutzenegger both from Provo originally,
Yes.
and
Well, I hope so. They're sisters, so they would probably be from the same place.
well, okay, I meant Provo. I guess you're right. I shouldn't have said both. Give me a break. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're from the same place.
That's true. You can be born in different places. My siblings are.
That's right, right. And you can be reunited. Doesn't even
That's
mean
true.
You know what I mean? So, geez, Andrew. Wow, how insensitive. Welcome. Thanks for coming.
you.
The story I was going to tell you about Brandon was this is a funny story. So Brandon and I were on the sidelines at a BYU Utah game. This is post his playing career, obviously. And Utah had, you know how each team provides game balls, right?
Yes.
Well, a Utah ball was thrown into the BYU sideline, and let's just say it disappeared. I'm not saying it was me, and I'm not saying it was Brandon, but it was one of us.
Never to be
Oh
known.
my
right?
goodness.
So have you seen a Nike football at your house with the Utah logo on it?
I mean, I'm gonna go look now.
Oh, he's going to kill me for telling that story.
Oh,
It's
that's
so funny.
funny.
And you know what? I don't even know if he walked off with it. I think he just... It's so funny because whenever a ball is thrown in the sidelines, each sideline has like 2 or 3 of those like freshmen in college, like ball boys, right?
Yeah.
And this kid was just running back and forth, just like looking for it everywhere. And we're just laughing. And so, yeah, I don't think it walked off the field. I think we just
Yeah.
hit it because it was a Utah ball. And
Yeah.
we kind of wanted to piss off the Utah
Right.
ball boy.
That is funny.
I'm glad we did because I
entertainment.
think it was the game that we had like, was it Taysom's? No, not Taysom's last year. This was just like 2 years ago where we had like a 30-point lead in the second half and then we blew it.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
So it was either that game or Taysom's last game at the U, but yeah, it was pretty funny. Brandon's a blast.
That is funny.
Sorry.
He is.
So hopefully I don't get him in trouble because none of us walked off the field with it. Let's just say that. At least
Okay.
as far as
As far as you know, unless it was like hiding.
I think this was
in
making
his shirt.
like having some fun with the ball boy. But if you've seen that ball, then maybe I'm wrong.
I actually have not seen anything Utah in my home.
Yeah,
So
seeing that would be the other thing. You'd probably just leave it in the parking lot. Because, yeah, you probably wouldn't want to take that ball home unless we had won. And then it might have been
Then
cool to
maybe
have a game ball
yeah,
from that
yeah.
game.
Yeah, you don't want to remember that game.
No,
No.
we don't.
No.
There's a lot of games we don't want to remember.
Yeah, I have some memories. I sure do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But right now, we're good. We're 1-0 against the good old U.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exciting.
So the past is just a story. That's what I always say.
Past
like
is
that.
just a story.
The past is just a story.
Past is just a story.
I live in the present, and we are 1-0.
There you go.
So anyway, welcome. Enough about
Thank
BYU
you.
football. Let's talk about you guys. You're both of very average height.
Yes.
we like
For
to
me,
think
average
so.
height.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? So how tall are you?
I'm 6
Alexis?
feet.
6 feet tall.
Yeah.
And Chante?
Oh, it's sad. I'm 5'9".
Well, you
I'm a
say
shorty.
that like
You like
it's-
say that like you're short.
Yeah. Well,
In your family, it sounds like you
You know how
might.
many
I
women
am
would
in my
love to be
family.
5'9"?
Yeah.
so I wear the heels. I try. I'm getting a little old for it.
Oh, I don't know how anyone could walk in heels.
I I'm getting to that point.
I know. It's no joke. I kind of think we ruined ourselves by trying for so many years.
Well, yeah, it's got to be hard when you're tall.
Yeah,
It's like you want to wear like we said, you want to wear the cute shoes, but
you do.
like you're already kind of limited.
Well,
All
and
the
then it's
little
just
short boys out there.
It's farther for you to sit down,
That's how I feel on the toilet every time. Like I hear those squatty potty advertisements. Like I don't need that.
You're like, that's already what it is.
My knees are already up to my chest when I'm sitting on the toilet.
They need to invent like toilets for tall people.
They-
Do they have that?
I swear they have like
They're hard
bigger
to find.
seats, but they don't really make them.
Like the height.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They need to make like risers.
There
That's
you
the
go.
company we should
Adjustable.
start.
You like press the
Yeah.
button
Like
and
an
it goes up.
insert.
Yes.
No, just like it adds on. Like you just because
A really big cushion.
Not even that would work, right? Like a new lid and seat.
Yeah.
That's not a bad idea. But yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
So I'll admit this. This is at Brad Davis's house. He's a very good friend of mine in California. I went bodyboarding all day, boogie boarding.
Yeah.
And I was wearing the little fins, that just totally wear your legs out.
For sure.
I went to sit on their toilet after doing that all day, and my knee gave out. And I just I totally cracked their toilet seat.
Oh my goodness.
And I had to come back out of the bathroom. I'm like, Barb, his mom. I'm like, I'm gonna go to Home Depot and get
That's
you guys
like a
new
scene
toilet seat.
from
Like,
a
what
movie
happened?
or
Like my knee
something.
gave out, and it's like a 3-foot drop.
It's like
My bad. I should stop with the stories now.
I
I'm
love it.
sorry.
Oh my goodness.
these are good
Bringing up
stories.
some good stories. So yeah, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you.
Enough about me. Let's talk about you guys.
So let's talk cis. So where'd that come from? Like,
So this is our story.
okay, let's hear it.
Yeah.
2020. That's where it started. Not really. Our story started before then.
But Let's Talk Sis was born.
Yes, in 2020. So we were asked to do an interview
It's like a little Facebook stream, like live
Yeah,
stream.
live stream. Wasn't a big
interview.
deal.
Right.
And they just wanted to ask us about our experiences with racism,
This was like right after.
George
Yeah,
Floyd.
just a couple months
like,
after.
yeah.
So things
Yeah.
were.
And so it was kind of like a favor to someone Chante knew. I told her, I'm like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to get in the middle of this.
Is that the first time you'd been asked to speak?
So let me give you a little more background. So
Okay.
we worked with 2 nonprofit organizations based out of Washington, D.C. and Miami, Florida. I started in high school. I wrote an essay, went to a training. The organization was really impressed, so they asked me as a youth delegate to be on their national board that later went international. So in high school, I was traveling back and forth to D.C., Dallas, Miami, had all these great experiences
About what?
to
Like, what
work.
was it
It
for?
was crime prevention, specifically in schools, and it was back when school shootings
Yeah.
first kind of were becoming a big thing, sadly. So there was a lot of talk on how do we keep our schools safer? How do we get kids involved where it's maybe not like they're ratting each other out, but it's anonymous tipping and we can just create a safer environment. So a lot of the board members were people, I mean, we had a guy from the Secret Service, we had lobbyists, we had just professionals in DC. And so as a young 15, 16-year-old girl,
Wow.
I'm getting to hang with all these people. And
What made you want to do that in the first place?
so I didn't necessarily want to. They just requested, and I thought it was a cool opportunity. And my mom was always encouraging us to see the world, to get out there.
Okay.
And I mean, it was kind of scary, like the first time she sent me, because
For
I was
sure.
young and innocent and grew up here in Utah. And
Right.
then, going to a big city. And I remember one night we got lost. Like it was just a lot of crazy experiences.
Yeah.
But it really created this desire to just want to show up, use my voice, working with a lot of kids in inner cities, like just experiences and stories that I didn't see here in Utah. And through that, of course,
Little
my best friend and
sister,
sister.
right? Tags along for everything.
Yeah, and we actually had by the end of our time there, we had a good group from Utah that were really involved and connected with all of these different organizations. So it was like something that we had done. Like we had traveled, we had spoken, at huge conferences.
I think we both spoke at the U.S. Department of Education conference like before we were 18.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were on C-SPAN.
Where did
Wow.
you guys? Where'd that confidence come from? Very, very few high school kids one would ever accept that, and then two would be able to do something like that.
I think she had more confidence. Alexis definitely did. I remember being in the bathroom almost vomiting before I went out to speak. And I was alone. You weren't with me at the U.S. Department of Education, and I was terrified.
Yikes.
Well, and I think part of it was like we didn't know it was such a big deal either.
Right.
Like our friends aren't watching C-SPAN. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah,
we're just like, hey, we were in DC and we did this thing, but it doesn't mean anything to our friends.
Okay.
And the few friends and family that were like adults, they thought it was awesome, but it was like, I think we just didn't fully know.
Which is probably a good thing.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, but it gave us lots of experience. And then, we went to college, we met our husbands, we got married, we started having kids. So this was not something that we were actively doing, but it was like in our wheelhouse of experience.
Okay.
And because of some of the experiences that my kids have had in Utah, with racial bullying and things being said, I've always had to be really involved in the school, in their classrooms. So I feel like I've been advocating, and Chante's been right along with me, for them, that we've created some curriculum. Like we've done a lot of things. And so when we were asked to speak on this, at this little streaming thing on social media, it's like we had things to say, but I didn't feel like we wanted to become public in the middle of so much tension.
Right.
And we're down in Spanish Fork and there's Confederate flags flying high. Like you just don't know where people are, if they like you, if they don't like you because of your skin color, that I wasn't trying to put my Black family out in the open. And so I told Chante, I said, I don't want to do this interview. And she was like, let's just do it. We'll keep it light.
Yeah. And they came to us and said, what's your social media? Like, what's your Instagram handle? We want people to be able to go to you for questions. We both kind of freaked out because we had our personal Instagrams and we didn't want to share that. So it was literally the night before the interview where Alexis is like, let's just make a new handle so people can come there and we won't have personal information.
But we weren't even expecting people to come.
No, we weren't.
It was just kind of like, we don't want them seeing pictures of our babies and our kids, so let's just make one. So
she's like, we talk about everything. We're sisters.
Talk sis.
Let's talk sis.
So I made it.
Great name.
And during the interview,
usually they said we were expecting a few hundred, but we had like 20,000 there.
Hold on. Whoa. What?
Yeah.
Live. And it was a 30-minute interview that went 90 minutes. And we had 20,000 people from all over.
And who is it with? I mean,
So it was High Five Live.
Oh, that's what it was. Yeah.
And it was even, I think the platform we were using.
Local?
Yeah. It's kind of like a church thing. We had never heard of it before. And then we were on StreamYard.
Yeah.
And even the owner of StreamYard called them after and said, we've not ever had that type of engagement before.
But it just went to show, I think, where we were as a country with these conversations. And people were like, what do we do? We're frantic. I mean, this was, 2.5 months after everything showed.
Yeah, there were people
George
from
Floyd.
Ireland, like international people were tuning in. And a lot of like how we like to talk about this is meet people where they are. And we understand sometimes there's a language barrier in this conversation. And even me marrying into a Southern Black family and seeing the experiences and spending time in the South, I can see that my family here in Utah, they don't know what they don't know. And so in order to have this conversation, it's almost like we're having to speak a different language to the audience that we grew up in. I mean, we're from Utah. We grew up in Provo. Like, this is our community. And we have an opportunity to speak in a way that hopefully they can understand and connect. And we really try not to use guilt or shame in this,
right?
And I feel like that was really, people wanted that. They were hungry for it. They wanted a safe place. And we shared stories. We were really vulnerable.
Right.
And from there, I think the next morning we woke up and there were like 500 people there.
And we kind of thought, oh, shoot, I guess we have to do something with this account.
Yeah. And then 2 days later,
so we posted a few things. Some things got shared. And it took about 2 days to have 6,000 plus followers.
Oh.
And it just grew.
Yeah.
And people wanted it. And we felt like it wasn't anything we planned on doing, but when the opportunity was there, we thought, let's keep talking. Yeah. Let's keep having these conversations. And I mean, we barely knew how to use Instagram. So we've like had to learn. I mean, I'm texting friends. I'm like, wait, what's this? I don't know how to do this.
Literally YouTubing how to like upload IGTV the first time. But here we are.
Well, it's crazy because I was just looking up. So when you guys launched in June of 2020, we did our episode with Yehosh and Tim. It launched June 15th.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it was like the same week possibly that all this stuff was going on, right? So that just gives me perspective on kind of where we were at. And to your point, wanting to have conversations, like that's why we had Yehosh and Tim come on, because good friends, I felt safe being able to talk about stuff and could appreciate their perspective on things. We also brought our niece on, Melana, that same episode. So, wow, that's crazy. So, I mean, it's been a fast and furious ride for you guys.
It's been a whirlwind.
It is. And it's been like, I mean, people reaching out, asking us to do things that we're just like, what in the world? And pretty quickly, TEDx Salt Lake City contacted us.
2 months after we started.
And we pretty much emceed that year. And that gave us a lot of connection. So it was just like everything we've done has just led to more and more.
Yeah.
And it's been great, but it's also been really hard to manage. And it's hard to know, where do we put our time? Because a lot of really tough, hard things are shared with us, and people want us to get involved and want us to help. And so it's just been interesting trying to figure out, like, what are we? What aren't we? What do we do? What don't we do? Balancing family life in the midst of it.
'Cause, you can't hold up every flag, right? Like you can't hold up every cause, and it's not saying that they're not important. So what was it that kind of ultimately gave both of you, call it confidence or conviction, that this was going to be the flag that you were going to hold up and you were going to stand in front of people and talk about this?
I think really what it came down to were the personal experiences. Like Alexis, her kids have been dealing with difficult things in their schools for a while. And so we were involved on a really small community level, but it hits home for us. It's things we've lived and we've experienced in this race conversation. It's something that touches our families so directly that I think that puts that passion behind it.
Well, and I think that we were already having these conversations. Do you know what I mean? It was just in a more intimate space with friends and family. But then to have this platform, and I think one of the biggest driving forces for us is when we started showing up and we saw the Black youth in Utah and how they responded seeing us talk about it. And I feel like there was one incident, there was one situation where I actually stopped the whole thing and I said, I just want to talk to the kids. And I saw the tears stream down their face. And I just remember, like, what would that have been to us when we were growing up if we would have had someone that looked like us talking about these things that are on our heart all the time, but we don't feel like there's safe space to talk about it. And I feel like it's like for our own children, but we've just seen this need where it's like the kids, they need these conversations. They need us to have these conversations with their parents so their parents can have these conversations. And I feel like that's been a big driving force for us to just keep going and keep showing up, because there's times it's emotionally exhausting. It's triggering. It hits close to home with experiences we've had. And then even we show up and people have feelings about us. Like, we're the Black girls in Utah that talk about race, and some people like it and some people don't. And then you're like, are people going to treat our kids differently? Right. You know? And so it's stressful, but we keep feeling like we need to do this, so we keep doing it.
Yeah.
And that's the trick, right? Just don't overthink the rest of it.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
You go with your gut. So just to add a little context, like you've mentioned a few times, I think it's important for us to repaint the picture for people on just what daily things, we have all these big things that we see in the media, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's important to talk about Melana was really interesting for that. Like, she's our niece, and God, we just love her to pieces. And she's pretty quiet. And, like you said, nobody should ever have to hold stuff in. But when you don't feel like there's a place to there's no one to listen, nobody cares,
or no one's going to believe you.
Yeah, or even if you, whether it's true or not, if that's how you feel, then we're doing something wrong. And no kid should have to carry that stuff. Like, that's adult stuff. Like, you can worry about that down the road. Like, you're not supposed to be having problems like this when you're a kid. You know what I mean? Like, you shouldn't be holding in all this emotion and just like, gritting your teeth and dealing with it. Like, that's not fair for anyone. But, you guys have mentioned kind of what you've experienced in your family. Like, do you mind if I ask what some of those things are?
Yeah.
'Cause, I mean, it's kind of hard to hear sometimes what happens, especially we grew up here, Provo, Utah. You think, very religious, very, all of these things, kind people, but it's happening, right? And just unaware of it, ignorance, right? Just very unaware of what's happening. And so I think it's important that we do hear some of what has happened and is going on, because I think it's important to know.
Well, yeah, we can't fix something we're not aware of, And so it definitely.
Well, and I think that we have a lot of compassion and love for this community, and they're great people here.
Yeah.
And it's hard because sometimes I think we use the love one another, if we'd all just be kind, but you can be kind and still have biased and racist beliefs.
They both can be true,
they
right?
They both can be true.
Yeah. It's not one or the other.
Whoop someone's ass.
Yeah. And so it's more than that. And sometimes going a little deeper in that conversation is hard. And I feel like, my mom, just to give you a little background, so our dad's black, our mom's white, but our dad passed away. So we kind of looked like the two adopted girls growing up, and our mom did a really good job trying to advocate and prepare us. But I remember, even in 4th grade, being told by a girl that she couldn't play with the N-word. And she called me the N-word in front of all my friends.
In 4th grade?
In 4th grade. And I remember I didn't fully understand what that word meant, but I felt this sick feeling, and I could see by the response of other people around that it was really bad. And I remember going home and telling my mom, and we talked about it. And it's interesting, I still actually know this girl. And it just cut me so deep that I didn't know. I didn't feel like I belonged. I didn't know. I felt embarrassed too, because all the other kids heard it. And basically only pointing me out and saying, I can't play with you because you're, the N-word.
Sad as a 4th grader to learn that stuff on their own, right?
Well, yeah,
Well, and that's the thing, is what a big part of what Chante and I talk about is that parents think, oh, my kids, we don't use that in our home. But it's like, especially in this day and age, you have social media, you have all kinds of different things that kids are picking up. And if you don't process through it with them, they could use it and they could really hurt someone. And so those conversations are so important. And then I feel like from that point, there were times that word was used. Chante's had lots of experiences, which I'll let you share. But I remember even in high school, sitting in a hall, I had missed a day, and the teacher told me to go out there and take a test. And then a school administrator saw me out in the hallway taking a test, and he got really upset and accused me of cheating. And he walked me in front of my whole classroom and made me have my paper, stood in front of the class and said, I found your student outside cheating. And then alluded to the fact of me being a troublemaker. And I remember my English teacher being startled and just saying, I told her to go take that test out in the hall. She's not cheating. And then I even remember later the same administrator accusing me of other things and me saying, go look at my grades, I'm on the honor roll. And he then said, you hang out with this group of girls, you brown girls cause all this trouble. And I said, I don't hang out with those girls. Yes. And there were a group of girls that had slashed some teachers' tires, and they were actually Polynesian, and he assumed that I was in that group. And he treated me so differently. And I remember him later going and looking at my grades and even saying, like, I made a mistake. But it was just always having to prove yourself that you were a good student. You weren't a troublemaker. And being accused of like trying to get into a dance without paying. And I had teachers, saying, no, she paid. And I just felt like I was labeled when I felt like I was doing everything right. And I was a good student, and I, was involved in all these extracurricular activities. And it just felt like I couldn't get away from this label that people had because of what I looked like. And then Chante, you can share some of your experiences.
Well, it's interesting because there's like the day-to-day experiences, which, it can be termed microaggressions. And some people think, oh, it's just people being too sensitive, when people want to touch your hair, look at the palms of your hands to see what color they are, all these different things. You feel like you're on display. But why that's so harmful, I think, for kids is because it makes them feel like they're wrong. Like something's wrong with them, oh, your hair feels weird.
There's attention being brought to it.
And it's a constant thing. Like, I can't tell you how many times it happens in a week, going to the store.
People are touching my kids, touching their hair, just like, does your skin feel the same way? Or like, why are the palms of your hands white? And it just draws all this attention that it makes kids feel like, well, maybe there's something wrong with me. Like maybe I don't belong.
Right.
And even the research on belonging is so profound. Like all of us need to feel like we belong so we can thrive in the environments that we're in.
Yeah. So I guess ultimately it's like, we've got to be more familiar with diversity so we're not treating people like aliens. That's
I think
a problem.
That right there is so important. Like, being familiar with it or being comfortable with it and having it not be so different.
Right.
Yeah. I was thinking about your gym story.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So this was for me the first time that I was like, holy cow, my skin color is going to be a problem. And, I had a lot of things happen as a kid, but you can kind of brush it off, those little micro things that aren't huge. But I was leaving the gym. I was, maybe 19 or 20, walking home from it was Gold's Gym back then.
It's like 7 years ago.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. And, there was this big black truck that pulled up next to me. And I don't know, probably like 8 guys. There were a bunch in the back of the truck and some in the cab. And they started just screaming the N-word at me and throwing liquid and glass bottles out.
What?
And I froze because it's like, yeah, I should have called the police in that moment. But it was the most crazy experience of they're doing this to me because I'm black. Like, holy cow, I haven't done anything wrong. And here I am getting chucked bottles at me, and it shook me. It shook me pretty bad. And that was kind of just the beginning. I feel like we've had a lot of big things happen. So we talked earlier why I moved to Spanish Fork. I was living in Orem, and it was Christmas time. This was 3 years ago. And I had a 5-month-old and a 5-year-old. So we're loading the car, and I lived in a townhome that didn't have like a garage. It was just a carport. So I'm right off of a main street. Anyway, I'm loading my kids in the car and I hear something and I'm like, that's loud. What is that? I kind of look around. And as I look around, I see a car stop in the middle of the road. And 4 men jump out of the car and start running towards me and my baby, screaming, "I'll have you nigger dead on this street." And they're sprinting towards me like, "I'll kill you," screaming racial, profanities. And I got my 5-year-old in the car and I literally just threw the baby carrier in. Like there was no buckling or anything. And I pulled out and sped off and I could see them in my rearview mirror just screaming behind my car. And, I called my husband first and he's like, "You need to get off the phone with me and call 911. But the next day, that same car was parked in front of our home. And so, the FBI hate crime unit got involved and they just said, they know where you live. Hopefully they're going to bark louder than they bite, but we don't know that. And so we listed our house like that week and we were gone. But it's just, this was 3 years ago.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And it's just
crazy.
It's insane. And it's something that I had never imagined happening to me, but because it's all those little things that happen daily that you get really used to ignoring. But when something big happens and you realize your life could legitimately be in danger. And I had to explain to my 5-year-old, like he heard those words being screamed at us. And even now he still talks about those bad guys, and it's pretty awful.
I remember when Yehosh talked about his wife. Why is her name escaping me?
Vanessa.
Vanessa.
Mm-hmm.
I love her. Like getting mad at him for wanting to go on a walk at like sunset.
Yeah.
Just like a beautiful night. He's like, I just want to go for a walk. And, he's down in Spanish, right?
Yeah.
And I was just like, what? Wait, why? And it's just like, well, like if somebody doesn't know who I am and they just see some random black dude walking in the neighborhood, like you just never know what'll happen. It just hit me like, when's the last time I was ever scared to walk around in a neighborhood?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we walked through
that is a problem.
like downtown Chicago, not scared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, I'll never forget that either. You know what? And I had like a lot of my customers were black, and I would ask them like, how come nobody gives us any crap? Well, because the police will actually do something if something happens to you because you're white. Yeah. And I was just like, what? That's real. And I mean, I could walk past one of the nastiest gangs on earth, just say, what's up? And they just be like, they all thought I was either like the only reason a white dude would be walking through the neighborhood is if they were a cop or like a missionary or something.
Right.
And it was just like, but how sad is that? Like even in, predominantly black neighborhoods, it's like, I still have the advantage, and that sucks. So I can't even imagine, it must've been so cool for you guys to you went to DC, right?
Yeah.
Anybody who's been to DC, that is a very polarizing town. Like it is it's like, let's talk Hunger Games. What's the district? What's the main one? And then the poor one. It's like you go from like the history, the ultra rich and powerful to just like, you got Washington, DC, Baltimore. Like it's gnarly. Like it's scary, scary stuff.
Yeah.
And but growing up in Provo, it's like you guys kind of have the responsibility. Like that's a lot to carry. Like we're the diversity here. Cause 28. I know we kind of joked with the age. I don't know how old you guys really are, but
28.
even now there's not, a lot of, racial diversity in Utah County. So even though, you guys are black growing up in Provo, you didn't get to see a lot of racial diversity either. Like, and to go and see that must have been such
it was life changing for us. Like we literally, I even remember just being a girl here, and just being like, maybe I'm biased, but I don't think we were ugly. But, it's like we weren't the cute little blonde cheerleader, So going even to these more diverse conferences, and I even remember it gave us different confidence. We're like, oh my goodness, the boys like us. Like, the boys are coming after us, and in Provo,
I have a
don't
problem
care.
with that. So how come the black dudes have it so easy here? Because every
It's
white
different.
chick on earth
I
loves
know.
the black dudes.
That is true.
It is.
Right?
It
It is true.
But it's interesting because we also
Messed
saw
up.
a shift. Destiny's Child. I'm serious.
Interesting.
We started
Changed
getting
our
more
life.
attention.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yes.
The
Oh,
bigger,
yeah.
like Whitney Houston got when she started more of her modern CDs, Destiny's Child, Beyonce.
Yeah.
We started getting more dates.
Don't forget
Like I'm
TLC,
not even
please.
kidding.
Please don't
Yes.
forget TLC.
But as you see kind of the black women rise and get more attention, I feel
Really
like that
interesting.
trickled down here. So by the time we were in college, it was a little bit of a different story. So either it's like guys
Wow.
who serve their mission somewhere diverse, or someone who had a thing for Beyonce. Then it like,
right.
but you knew kind of quick. You're like, okay, this is why they're asking me out.
Everything is marketing. Everything. Right?
Isn't it true though?
Well, it's funny because we were talking about that before you guys got here is, with Black Lives Matter, the biggest problem isn't the message, it's the marketing, it's the branding. It's like, there's a couple of quotes that I have just been rocked by on your Instagram. And you guys are practicing what you're preaching. It's not that Maya Angelou
It's
quote.
the second post.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. Yeah. That is just not judgmental. It's giving, it's Christianity. It's giving grace.
It is. And we can relate to that because I'll tell you, spending time in the South with my husband's family.
Oh, the South is no joke.
Like I changed a lot of the things I thought. I really did.
Like what?
So I feel like I grew up here in Utah thinking a lot of things were like based on your work ethic.
Yeah.
And so if you got an education, you worked hard and you did your best, that you would probably be treated pretty fairly. And that if you weren't doing that, then maybe that was why you were treated poorly. Okay. And so I feel like there was this high standard, and you'll hear this now. It's kind of the pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality.
And kind of that mentality of, well, you did it to yourself sort of thing. Like you chose not to get an education. That's why you're having all these problems, as opposed to maybe that wasn't even an opportunity kind of thing.
And so then spending time there. And I feel like growing up here in Utah, too, with predominantly conservative beliefs, even just like politics, beliefs in the church. And then I felt like I tried to take what I knew and what worked for me and apply it in this different setting, and it did not work. And I even remember at our wedding reception, there were a couple of sociology professors that were in my husband's ward back there. And because I was majoring in sociology, we had some conversation. They started telling me about incidents in the community of where Black people were harmed or killed. And I remember I was like, what? what? Like, because
this
where
in
we
the South
live,
still?
yeah, in the
Right.
South, and I just couldn't believe it. And it's these white professors telling me about it being unsafe for Black men, and it was a different level than what I even knew from the experiences that I had in Utah as a light-skinned Black female. Right. And then seeing things that start happening to my husband. And I was telling Chante about this on the way over. There was one time some cops showed up at our house here at BYU, were accusing my husband of stealing, and it was just horrendous. And they said that they could hear, like, the cell phone was pinging in our area.
And they talked to a cell phone?
Yes, that he'd stolen a cell phone. It was pinging the area. And we were in a fourplex, all young college married students. And they talked to everyone there, and it wasn't a big deal, but they would not leave Brandon alone. And I remember they came back with more police cars. And I remember the police kept telling me, please step aside, ma'am, and pushing me back. And they kept saying, we know you did it. Let's just go down to the station. And they kept like saying, it's going to be worse for you if you just don't admit it. Come on, we know you did it. Let's go down to the station. And I remember feeling so helpless. And where I grew up in my world, if you use your words, if you know your rights, you're okay. But I see Brandon using his words, knowing his rights, and even me using my words and being told to go back in the house. My kids are crying at the doorstep. My neighbors are all standing around horrified. And they're seeing
this did BYU not married housing?
Yes.
Were these BYU cops?
So no. It was Provo PD.
Yeah.
And so I'm like seeing they're horrified. They've not seen this happen. And it's like everything that I was taught. You know, if you look people in the eyes, if you're respectful, if you do what you're told, you're going to be okay. And I'm seeing that's not happening. And they're literally trying to take Brandon down and accuse him of something he didn't do. And then even his name got out. Some girl got on social media, was totally tearing him to shreds. He didn't do it. And it was ridiculous. And I feel like in my early marriage, things keep happening like this. And it's outrageous, you know, like even Brandon was taken into like a cop car in a canine unit with a dog. They wouldn't tell me anything. I'm calling my mom. She's trying to get a hold of the head of police. Like, it's just, he's not innocent until proven guilty. He's labeled, and it doesn't matter what we do or say. And I even remember telling an officer once, being like, he works at BYU. He has a master's degree. Like, and that doesn't matter, you know? And so I
just
feel
his
like
demeanor, like, sorry to cut you off,
I know,
but I've
you
known
know
Brandon
him.
a long time.
Yeah.
Like, it's Brandon. Like,
I know.
he is the nicest, like, smiling all the time. He's just a sweetheart.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's always been that way. And it's like, but when we talk about holding grace, it's like, it makes me emotional. But it's like, my husband was so patient with me in my learning journey as I grew up in one world and then saw some of those beliefs and perspectives didn't work in his world. Right. And I saw these people that were working so hard and didn't have some of the opportunities or access that I grew up with. And I felt like I was judgmental. And the more time I spent and the more I saw the family history ties of the people that had been chased from their homes burned. Like, that is not very many generations back. Like, that's in the family history. And so
that's
I
three
feel
people
like
back.
It is.
Right.
Exactly.
That's it.
It's three people back. And I'm just like, I say it all the time. I'm just so thankful that he had patience with me so that I could see. And I've had my own journey. So when other people are coming into this conversation, I can hold space because I feel like a lot of my Black friends and family held space for me as I was trying to learn.
Because your level was different.
It was.
You know, it's like, it's such a hard thing to quantify, right? Because it doesn't feel different when you're in it, right? But like you said, it can always, I mean, I think we can apply that to almost anything for anybody. Like, it can, no matter how hard things are, it can always be worse. Where did Brandon grow up again?
He grew up in Alabama, and then they moved to Tallahassee, Florida.
So let me tell you a little Alabama story really fast. So I blew my knee out on my mission in Chile. Came home for a month. I was such a screw off the first 6 months of my mission that I did not want to be released. Like, I had to like pay back the Lord, right? I had to finish. So they reassigned me to the Dalton, Georgia, or Tennessee Knoxville mission, but I was in Fort Payne, Alabama. They had a lot of like sock factories there. And so they needed to open a Spanish-speaking mission. Well, the KKK was still active in that part of Alabama. And we worked with the Salvation Army 2 days a week, just doing pickups and service. And in the South, like if I was working with Latinos, it was easy. Like we could get a lot of work done, like humble people, like it was great. But like trying to track in the South, like Mormons are not well liked, right?
Yeah.
So we thought it best to do service. And so we did Salvation Army. I translated at the hospital 3 days a week. But I'll never forget Lee Cobble, who ran the Salvation Army, took us. He goes, let me show you what the real South is. And he didn't say it bragging. He's like, keep your mouth shut. Don't take any pictures. I'm going to take you somewhere, like, just act normal. We're like freaking out. And it ended up being a KKK swap meet, for lack of a better term.
Wow.
Guns. I mean, I saw T-shirts that would blow your mind. Like this is 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But I mean,
That's not that long ago.
that's not long ago. And I mean,
not very
we're
long.
talking like active Grand Dragon dude living in town still. It's wild.
It is.
And we've seen it time and time again. Like it is not much better there now than it was 20, 40 years ago. Like that's a lot of history to break.
It is.
And I can't even imagine what it would be like growing up Black in some of those areas.
Right.
So,
And I think
like,
that's the
so
thing.
real.
We couldn't imagine it either,
Yeah.
It was just, and it's crazy to me because I bring this up a lot because it's been something that's really kind of rocked my world as far as Alexis and I, and what we experienced growing up was so similar. We look alike, we talk alike, all that stuff. And then I married a white guy. I married this Midwestern white boy. And let me tell you.
Corn-fed white boy.
Yes, exactly.
Midwest.
Exactly.
With the Schwarzenegger last name.
Yes, our lives are so different now.
Right.
I don't ever I don't fear anything. Like, just like you brought that up with Yehosh, Alexis has so many stories of, even your story of being pregnant and feeling like Brandon couldn't go to the gas station for you in the middle of the night. Like, I don't ever think about that stuff. And then to even add to this, we're raising children and her children are dealing with crap. And my kids, nothing. Like, I have these little light-skinned, blue-eyed children. Right. And so it's like this, to me, the disparity shows the magnitude of the problem.
And that color really is the problem.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
See, and that
interesting perspective.
Yeah, that's really, really
sisters, family, tight-knit, cousins.
If that's not proof
but just
that
living
it's color.
Same city,
Right.
everything,
Yeah,
same neighborhood.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Same everything.
Yeah, same everything.
Well, and it's interesting because it really does help us speak from different perspectives. Even I'm saying, like, maybe talking to other Black kids and saying, it's really not about you. And I know it hurts and it stings, but these beliefs are representation of something bigger. And I wish someone would have helped me maybe know that I wasn't wrong or the problem, or there wasn't something inherently wrong with me and I wasn't cursed. And so it's like trying to help Black kids navigate these situations, take care of their mental health, find a support system. And then Chante speaks to the other
like,
side.
How do you interrupt racism? How do you recognize it? And, I have an 8-year-old and we talk about this stuff all the time. What are we looking for? What do you go to the teacher for? What are the things you can say? Like, we role play this stuff.
Well, and how many people get defensive if you try to bring it up? Like, I would never do that.
Right. And so it's a different perspective, but we have to teach not just like acknowledging diversity, but embracing it and loving it and normalizing it. Yeah.
And it's tricky too, because we at the beginning, I feel like we're talking to parents so they could talk to their kids, but we quickly realized, no, this is the broken down level that adults need.
Yeah.
So it's like 100%. We're not talking on how to talk to kids. Like, we're really talking to people and they are absorbing it at the level that we're giving it. And it's interesting too, because it's so hard, even if kids walk into situations and are prepared, like if, kids know how to watch out and help a friend if something's said to them, and a Black child knows how to advocate for themselves. If the people in charge and the teachers and administrators aren't trained and aren't prepared to handle it or deny it,
Correct, right.
and don't take care of it, then it creates a bigger problem. And I think we're seeing some of that right now, where we're seeing like so many of these hot topic issues are tied up in all of this, and people are afraid of parts of it, or there's extreme version here and then an extreme version there. But our concern and our worry is if we adults can't figure it out, it's hurting the kids.
Yeah.
Well, the other sad part is the liability of it all, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't, people are more incentivized to just shut up and like just deny for because they're scared that they might get sued or they might.
Right, and that's what
problem.
we found is teachers are afraid.
They
don't feel like they can say anything right. If they go one way, it's wrong. If they go the other way, so they're terrified.
Can't choose
and
a
that's
side.
a problem in and of itself, you know?
Yeah.
That neutrality is, you're right. I mean,
It's gone in our world in general.
Yeah.
There is no common sense middle ground. Both sides are right. Truth to be found. It just doesn't exist.
Well, and you're threatening, like, that's the problem with political correctness, right? Is you have so much to lose. I mean, you got the PC police, like, if you don't pick the right side, you can lose everything. Instead of just having open, like, dialogue and just like Maya Angelou's quote, you know, like, you may not be in the right spot now, but we'll give you some grace for a minute until you learn, and then just do better with it.
Exactly. No
but
shame.
if you make one mistake, you know, your business can just be gone.
Well, and we're
that's
hearing
scary.
that a lot too. And
terrifying.
it's like we actually have developed a workshop because we feel like these conversations are hard to just do on social media. Like you have to go into history, you need historical context, like to really participate in this conversation. And we recognize this because we've had to do the same for ourselves.
Sure.
And I also feel like my in-laws have given so much grace and just sharing their family history stories and the effects and all of these things that it's like to have a conversation, you need to go back there. And
I think that's something that we don't quite appreciate.
Yeah.
I don't think we appreciate that because, I mean, I feel like I can even now, I'm like, okay, how do I choose my words? Or how do I say this the right way? But for example, just like slavery, for example, so many people say, well, it's not happening now, so it shouldn't be an issue. It's just not true.
Right.
It is an issue.
Yeah.
The fact that it happened, like, I don't know what I'm trying to communicate, but we dismiss the past when it doesn't maybe line up with something in our world, right? Like, it's funny because I'll just use this example. In this area, there's a lot of members of the church, right?
Yeah.
They talk about the pioneers and all the stuff they have to go through, and they always talk about it. And they talk about family history and how they're drawn to their ancestors and what they had to go through and what that means to them now. But then as soon as the conversation...
That's really interesting.
As soon as the conversation turns and you talk about racism and slavery and what has happened, they go, oh, but that's not happening now, so you shouldn't, you shouldn't feel
you should
anything
be able
about
to
that.
Understand that.
No, that's not okay for you to feel about that. That's just not right.
Alexis and I talk about this exact example all the time because it's kind of proof that what happened before us helps to create who we are, where we are, what
our
we do.
identity.
Everything.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, even when we're talking about slavery, it wasn't just something that happened a really long time ago, right? Like we're looking at slavery into black codes, into redlining, into the civil rights era, into all of the things that are
incarceration.
Right. And it's like, okay, then what was that? The civil rights era for Alexis and I was one generation ago.
Yeah.
You know, and how does that affect us today? Well, it still does. And so we're ignoring
It's not even quite a generation ago.
No.
You know what I mean?
Well, to your point about Alabama and what's going, you know what I mean? That's
So it's interesting because we look at like Mormon pioneers and how we learn and we take from their experiences. There are studies that literally show that Black parents parent differently because of the fear that was ignited during those times, and how they act and how they react to things is still connected back into times of slavery and all of the things that have subsequently happened. And so to just turn a blind eye to it, it's insanity to me.
Well, and I think that you'll see, I love, because we've kind of talked about the Bonners, but even what Mally Bonner has done about bringing these stories that are actually pioneer stories of what was going on with the Black folks back then.
Yeah.
And I mean, we have been reading and researching, but even understanding that in the South, when some of these plantation owners and families converted to the church, they would bring their enslaved people along with them. And what were their experiences? What were their stories? It's so fascinating and it's so interesting. And I feel like it's hard because people will shut it down, but to us, it's so crucial. And even from like a psychological, mental health perspective, if you have trauma or difficult things that happened in your past, the only way to heal and move forward is to acknowledge them, to work through them, to process them. And if we don't do that, I don't see how we can really move forward in this.
No.
Well, and if Mormons need more reminder, go be a Mormon in the South and you'll get like, there's a reason I couldn't wear my missionary stuff or tags or anything, because the KKK, like, Black people are at the top, but Mormons, it's very clear. They're like just underneath, like, they will go after LDS people. Like it's,
well, and they like,
it's wild.
Yeah. They'll play that victim card, but they won't allow anyone else to admit
and that's
acknowledge that it's happening differently, but the same thing.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
Well, and I think sometimes it helps, which this is funny because, you know, looking at us, we look like Black girls, but we have Mormon pioneer stock.
We sure do.
Right.
And so, yes, we do. I mean, even our how many greats grandmothers sat on the prophet Joseph Smith's lap and played with his pocket watch. And I mean, that's our white side. That's our family history.
Yeah.
And so I feel like when we show up in spaces, sometimes that helps people because we can say like, yeah, we can acknowledge this part and we can also acknowledge this part and this history. This is in our blood. This is our family history.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's so much us versus them right now that in a weird way, we're kind of like that.
You're like that bridge almost between the two sides.
It's a huge advantage. I mean, it's kind of a gift.
It's a huge responsibility, but it's a huge gift.
You know, and the question that has been lingering kind of has to do with what you just said. Like, you know, you mentioned self-care. Like, how do you not? Because here's something that I think is it's a fine line, right? Mm-hmm. Like when you see this stuff with your kids, like with what you've experienced, with what you're trying to accomplish, like how do you not even feel like a victim and really take that mantle? And because from what I'm hearing, that'd be really easy to do, like really easy to like fall into. But two, how do you take care of you so you don't just get pissed off and just start blowing it up? Because I don't say that joking, like it looks like I struck a chord with a Schwarzenegger, but but honestly, like this is, I shouldn't even bring it. I talk a lot about mental health a lot because I have ADHD and we have a lot of inherent shame, like growing up, and talk about holding stuff in, but it doesn't even hold a candle to what people of color have to deal with, right? And even I sometimes struggle just feeling like, man, I got dealt a crappy hand. Like it's really easy to kind of fall into that. How do you do that?
I want to hear your answer.
Well, first, your first part of the question, I've never really felt like a victim ever in this. And I think it's because to me, that feels like I'm giving the upper hand.
Yeah.
I like to feel in control all the time. And so to me, it feels more like a responsibility and a pressure on my shoulders to make sure that everyone can see why I'm not a victim, if that makes sense.
Totally does.
But with that responsibility, holy cow, I feel like Alexis and I are battling this. How do we balance and how do we take care of ourselves? Because we are raging all the time and we're calling each other, screaming about this and that. And
your moms and wives.
We are. And that mama tiger comes out.
Especially when we're protecting our kids.
Yeah.
It's a whole different level of rage.
I can't even imagine it. Because last week, Brody, I picked him up from school and he was just crying. I was like, what happened? He was like, dude, I've been bullied, Dad. I was like, hold up, what? Like, hold on, this was my first experience with this, right? I was like, tell me what happened. And so we kind of walked through the situation, and it was really innocent. He had a substitute teacher. His name is Brody, and the substitute teacher read the name Body. He forgot the R as he's reading the name.
Yeah.
And a couple of his good friends, Body, Body. And super innocent, just having fun. But like it hit him so deep. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like, hold on. Like, and I was like, okay, I'm calling the principal. I'm calling the dad. I'm about to show up on the schoolyard because I know these kids. I'm about to put your face in the water. I'm like, okay, what's up? Say that again. Say it again.
Yeah.
You know? And it's like,
nice body.
But it's like, it's immediate. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
Like I had to take a breath. And so we talked through what to do. And it doesn't compare, but it at least it gave me a glimpse into what that would feel like.
You're usually so calm. I just like hearing that you reacted that way.
I didn't react that way.
I
you
kept
wanted
it in.
To.
Okay.
Yeah,
But, but my first reaction was that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
But
for
you and your
sure.
damn self-control.
Well, I like a couple things that you said I think were really important, because sometimes people will dismiss racial bullying because impact and intent. Like, just because the kids weren't meaning anything
Doesn't mean it didn't impact your child.
and it didn't really affect him and how he felt. And so I feel like when we hear some of these situations, having that sensitivity. And I mean, I feel like Chante and I are always like, we want kids to have a learning opportunity. We don't want to guilt or shame, but we just want to teach them so they can show up differently. And if we don't talk about it or acknowledge it, then it could continue to happen. And I truly believe with a lot of the situations I've seen, first of all, I don't think some of the parents could even imagine their kids saying some of these things. And second of all, I think that when we handle it with just education, talking, like it can be so much better in the long run. And it's hard because I feel like, especially being on Instagram, I mean, sometimes our DMs are not healthy. Like it's just not, it's not good for us.
Yeah.
And then also the more that we are people are aware of us in the community, then it's like, we need Let's Talk Sis to help.
Yeah.
Look at this situation. We've tried everything we can. Let's bring them in. Let's see if they can help. And when it comes to kids and young people, I mean, our bleeding mommy hearts are like,
there. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do whatever we need to. But it's like, it's impossible. We don't have the mental, emotional bandwidth. We have our own family. So I feel like the hardest part is knowing like what we can't do and knowing our limits and protecting that. And I wish I could answer and tell you like, this is how we preserve our mental health and this is what we're doing.
But I was
figuring it out.
Add to it that we do have a community of people who are working this with us, alongside us. And I feel like that takes a lot of it off. And we can call people, be like, we're struggling with this, and we can refocus on our purpose as opposed to our, current emotions, because that's really our goal, is to improve things. And if we just sit in all of those negative emotions, we don't move forward. But it's a journey. We're still figuring.
It is.
Still
and our
learning.
community has been key. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Like even today, we've been on the phone with people with different situations, and knowing that we're not alone in this. And we have to help support each other. And sometimes one person leads out and some of us have to rest, and then someone else.
We rotate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
But still, that's so hard. Like, because being a mom, we say this all the time, hardest job in the world.
Thank you.
But
Yes.
you have to be a mom and deal with, your kids are dealing with things that other kids don't deal with, right? And so that makes it harder. But you're also wives.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we have to have relationships with our spouses, right? And I mean, it's a big responsibility doing what you guys are. I mean, it's a big responsibility, not to mention knowing how to like check the emotion from, what you're doing out in public at the door, so you can just be at home and be present, right?
It would be a
It's
giant lie to
Luckily
tell
you're
you we
women.
have it figured out.
If you were men, if you were men, you couldn't do what you're doing. Seriously.
that's the truth.
It's totally the truth. Like like I always say, like it's amazing how you guys can just put something away and move to the next thing and do it again and do it again. Like with us, it's like if the box is out, we have to deal with that box. We can't put it away until it's dealt with. Like all the emotions are dealt with. Like and that's why we've both learned that women are better than us in almost every way. But it's a lot, and that's as your friend now, hopefully.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
That's what I would worry about. Is just making sure you are okay.
Yeah.
Because this is an uphill battle.
It is.
Well, it is. And honestly, if you think about it, it's probably not going away. But we can't think like that either. We have to do all that we can. There's urgency in this.
Improve it. Yeah.
We can improve it. And sometimes it's
the
hard to
starfish
recognize
thing, right?
that.
The kid throwing the starfish in the water.
Made a difference to that one.
Right? The old man walks by and says, you're never going to save all these kids. He's like, nope, but I made a difference for that one.
Yep.
Right? And that's what you got to do. You got to just...
It's that mentality.
You
that
do.
one person you might help, right?
Well, and I believe in the ripple effect too.
Totally.
I really do. And it's like, I think our
change
husbands...
generations with one person.
It really does. And I feel like they worry about us. And they also have to hear a lot. Because when we get fired up, like that's who we go to. You know, even my husband's out of town right now. And I've called him several times. I'm like, and I have to talk it through. And then I can calm down. And then I can show up.
Sure.
And we have to, there's times we'll go silent on Instagram. Like we know there's this stinking algorithm that you have to play into, but we have to go silent because we know that we are trying to show up a certain way. And if we can't, we have to take a step back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to see you guys mad.
Ooh.
This may, hopefully I don't get in trouble for this question. We don't get scared to ask questions. But black mom mad is way cooler than white mom mad.
Well, and actually, I want to touch upon this though.
I have some very close friends, and when they get mad at my friends, I love it. It's just they will whoop their ass. It is the best.
Well,
Anyway.
and it's hard though too because there's also that stereotype
I know.
that it's like we feel like we have to navigate a lot because
See, that sucks.
we are. If we get too mad, then we're the
just
angry black women.
Oh, but see, I don't.
And
I
then
just
we're
look
the
at it as like more
victims.
personality.
And all these-
It's not like more angry.
Yeah.
It's just like
It's
just
true,
more
though.
real. But I get that, and that's what. But see, I hope you guys. I wanted to feel like we can ask those questions.
Totally.
You know what I mean? Like
Totally.
I don't like. We're so scared to even say something like that, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, and that's kind of what like that's what's so good about what you two are doing is if I feel safe enough to say that, hopefully everybody else does too. You know what I mean? Because that's real. And now I understand a different side of it. Like I would have never thought like you do have to balance that, right? Right? Like to
Because
me,
if
it's
we're
a
in
funny
that
question.
label, we can't be as effective because now people perceive us as a certain way.
Yeah.
And so it's tricky. Like we're
That
navigating
sucks.
a lot. Like
Yeah, but
we don't want to
could
be
have
the
a
victims.
show
We
just
can't be
based
the
on our
angry
anger. I
people.
think it's pretty entertaining. Like I'll hand you that. We get going and
well, and sometimes we amp each other up, and sometimes like one is like this, and I'm like, it's okay. The other day she had to do that for me. I was heated.
Yeah.
And then the bad words start flying. And you guys, we grew up like our mom never swore in front of us.
Right.
So we did not grow up learning bad words. And now we're in here and we're like,
swearing like sailors.
oh my goodness.
Do you care if I ask what it was? Like just or in a roundabout way what it was? Because that's
you?
yeah.
Yeah.
Like that. Is that okay?
I mean, yeah. And it's, I think, a stem of things. It's been a hard couple weeks.
Right.
And I feel like we're feeling like there's a lot of kids that need us to advocate. And
Is it because what happened with Izzy?
yeah,
That was one of
that was
one of
one
the
of
things.
them. But there's always so much more, and there's more behind it, and there's more stories. And because we usually go in pretty deep, like we're pretty good about our research. And so if something's happening, we're usually talking to the people right in it. But we're careful. We don't exploit that. We can't share everything on Instagram. And sometimes there's a lot of judgment that comes our way, and we have to deal with it because we're protecting real people.
Sure.
And I feel like there's a lot of situations too where that's heavy on
sorry,
your heart.
but what you mean by that is you could drop more information to prove your point,
yeah, right. And we choose
but
not to.
you can't. That's very interesting.
And we choose,
Okay.
and this is in so many situations that we've been in, and it's hard because we feel like we're protecting a community that sometimes gets a really bad rap, and we have to think about things that sometimes you don't have to think about in other situations.
It's almost like you're looking out for them, but you don't feel like they're looking out for you.
Well, I feel like if
Who's
we're
that?
talking specifically of the Black community in Utah, I do feel like they're looking out for us. And I do feel like...
Who's they? Sorry.
So if we're
When you're
talking
saying
about
them, like who's looking out
we're
for you?
protecting some of the Black community, and we also feel like they are looking out for us.
Okay. I got
Sorry,
it. I got it.
I understood that you might have like something might have happened and you know information that could hurt someone not Black, and you're choosing not to share that, but you don't feel like you get the same treatment back.
It's
I understand
more,
what you're saying.
Do you
It's
see what
kind
I'm
of both
saying?
things.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, at least from my perspective, is something will happen to a Black child or youth, and we have to protect them and their families. And a lot of times, I don't want to say like white community, but a lot of our followers
Say it. It's fine.
they get angry because they're like, well, it could be this, it could be oversensitive. And we don't feel like we can be like, let's lay it out on the table for you to criticize. We have to protect these kids, but we're on the front lines of it, and we get all of this coming at us. And it really does trigger some rage and anger, because it's like, these are children we're talking about. Like, are you trying to criminalize them? You know, and so is that
Well,
sort of what
and-
you're saying?
and when
We're
you
the
know
buffer.
what you
we
know,
have to be
Yeah.
the buffer, and that's
makes
a
it even
hard
harder.
Right.
position to be in. So I'm feeling all of this, and then it's like I start worrying about my kids and their mental health.
Yeah.
And then the kids that we go out and we speak to and we connect with, and then our DMs are full of parents that are pleading with us to help. So you feel this weight, and then little things come up throughout our week where I feel like we're called in to do a job, and then someone's questioning us because they don't want it to be too heavy in race. And I'm like, well, that's what we talk about.
Yeah.
So then I don't have patience in that situation where I'm like, here we're being scripted on what we can and can't say. If you follow us, you know that we try to lead out with love and light and empathy and grace.
Well, look who
So
you
then
two
I'm
are.
like,
It's
maybe we're not
obvious.
the people for you. And sometimes I have the patience to have that conversation, but like yesterday I didn't.
Yeah, she was just like,
And
she
that's
had
okay.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
she had it. But, you know.
So it's just, there's so much behind the scenes that we do that we can't share, and we are a buffer. And sometimes that's hard because I know people don't know that, and I don't expect them to automatically know that. But sometimes that position is just a hard position to be in.
But ultimately, what she's saying is when white people hire us to speak to their community, but then they want to filter us and write scripts and buffer it to protect people from feeling uncomfortable. And here we are in the trenches of horrible things happening. It triggers us. We get pretty heated really fast with that stuff. Like,
Well, and
if
I
you want to
feel-
hear it, hear it. If you don't, then move
Why'd
on.
you even call?
Right.
I know.
Exactly.
Well,
Yeah.
and it's hard too because it's like, I feel like we do a really good job of meeting people where they are. And I don't want you to feel bad about yourself, your family history, anything like that. But some of these conversations, like we literally have to go in, and I swear we have to diffuse a room. We have to become friends first. And then we layer it. You know, it's one step, then another step.
What a pain in
And
the
so,
ass.
and it is.
you for
It
acknowledging
is.
Seriously.
It really is. But there's times too where I'm like, why'd you even call us then? Like, first of all, we go through all this work to do it this way. And now I feel like you're worried or you can't say this or can't do that. And I feel like even how we speak in general, we don't use these hot topic trigger words. We don't.
Yeah.
We try to use different words to have a similar understanding. We have to create different definitions sometimes because someone might define it this way, someone might define it this way. If we have different definitions, we can't have a conversation. So we have to figure out, okay, when I'm saying this, this is what I'm referring to, so you don't think it's something else.
Right.
And then maybe we
So
can have a
true, though.
conversation. Yeah.
Like
Jeez.
the word privilege. If
Yeah.
you ever use like that is one of those trigger words.
It is.
We don't
I do
use
hate
it.
that.
So
I
the
do
only
hate that
time
word.
I use
I'll
it.
be honest, I hate that word, but it's not because I think I hate it because other white people like yell at other white people with that word.
Yeah.
I don't ever, my black friends never say like, you got white privilege. It's other white people
Right.
that
It's
say
like
it.
ammunition.
Yeah.
They use it really
Well,
harshly.
you can weaponize these
Well,
words.
that
You
and
totally
that's
can.
that's
what the
why
media
not using
does.
those words is
Yeah.
so important
We
for doing
change
what
it.
you
Like,
do
we just
because
talk
that's
about-
it's the media. Like it is, they have weaponized
yeah.
words,
And it doesn't bring us together.
No.
Like we talk about access. What do you have access to that someone else may not? We don't need to use the word privilege.
Yeah.
Well, and I
Doesn't help
know,
us.
Yeah.
you know, like OUR, I know they deal with the same thing. Like they have, it's such a hard topic that people don't even want to hear it. They don't want to hear the realities of child trafficking. So like when they make the documentary and when they do fundraisers, like they're so overly careful about scaring people away because they just want to like go back to their little no problem house
Yeah.
and just feel like everything, the whole world is great. But it's like, like there are kids in our airport every day in Salt Lake that are being trafficked. It's right here. And it's just like, we have to be able to talk about it or nothing changes.
Nothing changes, yeah.
But it does suck that you guys have to, oh man, like, what a pain. I hope you charge more because of that crap. It's like, keep it real, people. But I, for whatever it's worth, thank you. Yeah. It means a lot that you guys are doing what you're doing. And that you care enough that those of us with white privilege, I'll say the word, like where we don't have to worry like Yehosh worries, like you guys worry about walking down the street, that you're giving us any grace at all. Because if I were in your shoes, I'd be like, bitch, like, kiss my ass. Like, if you don't like hearing it, peace out. Like, man up. It sucks, but you're making a difference, and I sure appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. That does mean a lot.
Man.
So I love these conversations, but I want to like turn it to action a little bit, like types of things that we can do, right? Like I remember with Yehosh, he was like, when was the last time you bought a dark-skinned Barbie for your kids? I was like,
yeah,
so cool.
I never even thought about that.
So much.
So now
good
every
advice.
doll we've ever purchased has been dark-skinned, and our daughters love them, right? It's not any different. So it's like trying to like ignorantly step into the conversation and into this place and help and
It's normalizing diversity, like you said that
exactly.
earlier,
Normalizing
right?
difference.
do what we can. So as you are talking, what types of things can we do, right? Because ultimately, to make the change, it's got to come from this side of the table. And I'm pointing to Cam and I, right? You guys can talk about it all you want, but you're living it. You're in it every day. Cam and I get to choose if we're involved in this conversation. We get to choose if we want to do anything, right? And so I think a lot of the change will happen when this side of the table starts to talk about it more and open up and act on things. And so what types of things can be done, or do you suggest when you go and talk for parents and kids, right?
This could be a whole other episode. But
We'll keep it
we'll
short.
try to condense
We're passionate
it.
about this topic.
So there's kind of two places we like to start. And first of all, we want to get people curious about history and learning it from different perspectives. And thankfully, we live in a day and age where there are movies, documentaries, books, podcasts. And I know sometimes, depending on your background, people are a little worried if it might be leaning to a certain political side, but we really encourage people to look into so many perspectives and to think about it and to talk about it. Like, we want critical thinking discussions. We want you to put yourself in those places, positions. And I feel like it can be really exciting if you do this with your spouse, if you as friends are like, hey, we're listening to this book or we're reading it and I didn't know this and this is fascinating. And so I feel like when we are anxiously curious about these things that we may not know, it creates so many opportunities for conversation. And
I love that, anxiously curious.
Yeah.
I really like that.
And it's really exciting. Like when you dive into it all the time, you're like, did you know this?
I know.
Why didn't we learn about this too?
So much that we never knew.
And so there's so many cool parts. And I feel like at least what I really try to help my kids see too is that, you know, you've heard people say, look for the helpers. But even throughout history, like I went back and I was like, who were the first white abolitionists that started speaking out against slavery? Who were they? What are their names? Because that was not a popular belief at that time. Who were the families that helped people escape? Like, I want to hear some of those stories because I feel like when we can see us working together, I hope it makes you guys more invested to learn and continue to be a part of it. The next thing that we jump into, which I'll let Chante go into.
I hope I can read your mind here.
Starts with a B. You got it?
Bias. Yes. Is that where we're going?
That's where we're going.
Awesome. So really, before we have these conversations with our kids, we kind of have to have these conversations with ourselves, right? And everyone's biased. If you breathe air, you have biased thoughts and beliefs. It's just how it is. Right. And really, it has its purpose as a protection, you know, that we filter through information, but it can be very harmful, especially when we have these thoughts and beliefs about certain groups of people, and we pass these things on to our kids. Like, we just do. So Alexis and I like to try and say, do little things to try and become more aware of your bias, notice the element of surprise. And this happens to us all the time where people will be like shocked or surprised about things like, oh, you didn't go to BYU for athletics? Wow, that's crazy. What is their bias?
You got in on an academics?
Right. Because we think and believe something and we try and apply it to everyone. You know what I mean? And that's...
Well, it doesn't help that you're both tall either.
Right.
I know.
Come on.
Well, and it doesn't always have to be a negative thing, too.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just
You
stopping
can't just
us
jump in with
Yeah.
that.
from knowing people better.
Yes,
that's really
and that's what we say.
doing.
It's a block from human connection. So if I put you in a box and I think I know you before I know you,
Right.
that's blocking me from really ever knowing you.
Right.
And I feel like that's so important as we try to connect as humans, learn each other's stories, that when we put up those blocks, then it keeps us from that. And so when we have a bias about someone because of gender or socioeconomic status or race, or I even feel like, we've sat and listened to white males say, I feel like people perceive me as this nowadays.
Yeah.
And so that's keeping us from getting to know each other. And
that's so key. Like
Yeah.
the communication piece, right? Like you're never going to know someone unless you talk to that person.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Yeah. How do we connect?
Like-
we all have a story.
yeah,
Right.
this world, that's my most frustrating thing in the world is like, you can say it about anything, but it's like, have you talked to that person?
Right.
Right? Like, and
Are you talking about every week when a podcast guest comes on?
Yeah.
You have to deal with me? It's like, ugh. You have to talk to this guy?
but like, it's something.
He's probably such a douche. And then 10 minutes, I'm like, you're my new best friend.
Yeah. But it's like,
I'm so bad at that. I totally do
but
that.
everyone does.
Yeah.
Everyone
right?
does.
Yeah.
I just admit it.
But like, that was something that Tim said that has stuck with me. It's like, I want to ask them why they feel that way. I was like,
Yeah.
fair. It's like, if you believe spiritually, if you believe politically, if you believe anything differently than me, as opposed to me just judging, saying, oh, it's because you're probably like that.
Yeah.
Like, well, why don't I just ask? You've probably put in some thought into how you've come to that place.
How boring would the world be if there wasn't any differences,
But like, why not
Amen.
appreciate
For
them,
that.
but learn from the person?
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Right? Like,
Get
have
to
that
know the person.
conversation. It's like,
Well, and when are you close enough to even have that conversation?
Right.
Because
Yeah.
you've probably not had that conversation with Brandon, and you know who he is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well,
Yeah.
just my buddy.
It's our niece.
But see,
It's our niece. I would have never known that
Yeah.
she'd been going through
Right.
racist events on a daily.
Yeah.
Because she's never brought it up. It's never from the outside impacted her.
Yep.
Until we had the conversation here, I was just like, oh.
But
Well,
see,
crap.
I take it for granted. Like, I grew up in LA. Like, I take that for granted. Like, I have never had to deal with, like, if I see a black person, a Mexican, or what.
Right.
Like, my school was like, it was like equal parts Asian, Mexican, white. Not as much black, but it was still a super diverse school.
Yeah.
And then I moved to Heber in like 94.
You're like, wow.
And I'm like, I stuck out like a sore thumb just because I was like a white surfer kid. Everyone else was wearing Wranglers. But like, that's the hard part, right? Is Tim said something about, do you remember he said something like, inaction is racism or something like that? It was a hard comment for me to hear. It was a little combative, but it's true. Like,
He wasn't saying it to be combative, but you took it that way.
well, whatever, Andrew.
I like this.
Whatever.
Good
Well, but they were very different
like
approaches.
complacency.
Tim
For sure.
was a little
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
Tim was a little more aggressive in his speech. The host is more like you guys, and it is true. Like, you mentioned something about like white males. Like, yeah, like with the Me Too movement, with a lot of things going on, what we're doing is we're just making everybody a victim and everybody like go to their corner and not work anything out.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the problem with words like white privilege, right? Because it makes people get defensive, wall up,
Well, there's
and not
two
listen.
very different definitions.
Totally
So
right.
if you have one definition and someone else has another, then that's really hard to communicate, and you
Yeah.
will feel those different feelings.
To your
Right.
point,
Sure.
it's a language
Separates us.
thing. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
Language barrier. Yep.
It absolutely
Language
is.
barrier.
Like, that's why we talk about marketing, right?
Yeah.
It's a poor word to use when we're talking about these types of issues, but in reality, it's
The concept is there. Yeah.
who said it? Language matters.
Stephanie, words matter.
No, it was, they have the clothing, I want to say clothing company, big husband, wife, they have black kids. They
Courtney?
Yes.
Courtney Brown.
Courtney Brown.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
It was, she said words matter.
Yeah.
And that really stuck with me. And that's true, not just from a communication standpoint, but from
So true.
like what you guys are talking about, the
Yeah.
way that you have to kind of
Yeah.
soften, your approach so people will listen. But it's hard because when you grow up here, I remember my kid saying, maybe it was Cohen. Can't wait for him to hear this when he's older, but he said something like, that guy looks like an Oreo. Just innocent. He's 3 years old.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's so rare for him to see a black dude.
Well, that's the thing.
And that kind of sucks.
Kids say things because, especially in Utah, they're not seeing it all the
No.
time. Diversity is really, few and far. And we kind of panic when we hear our kids say things, but it's like, that's totally normal. And
No.
it's a great conversation
It
opener.
is, the guy
And
turned
that's-
around and
yeah.
was so, like, he laughed and he was so sweet about it. Like, my poor wife was just
She was
terrified.
totally
It's
horrified.
like,
Yeah.
no black dude's ever going to get mad at a 3-year-old calling him an Oreo. Like,
Yeah.
but what a great,
Because
we've talked about it 100 times since. And
that's proof that kids are noticing.
Yeah.
Kids notice difference. And
For
if
sure.
we don't talk about it, it's kind of like if we never talk to our kids about sex. Like, they're going to figure stuff out, and it's probably not going to be in the healthiest way. So if we never talk
That's
up
true.
to our kids about, diversity and race, they're taking in information
Totally.
constantly and creating their own things. And if we're silent, we're making it seem taboo. We're making it seem
And we
bad
don't
and wrong.
want that.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what we're like, let the kids ask the questions, like create the conversation.
Yeah.
As adults, don't panic. And that's what we hear from probably people our generation is saying, whenever this came up at home, my parents shut it down.
Right.
They wouldn't let us talk about it. They seemed uncomfortable and they just tucked it away. And so then you start making these just kind of like conclusions. And there's a lot of
Inferences,
research
yeah.
to back this up too, that sometimes it's not that you're teaching your child these things, it's that you're not talking about it and they're making these connections based on the world that they're seeing. And in Utah, they're not growing up in
sure.
diverse situations.
Yeah.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah.
And so
that?
it's like we've got to just get to the root of so many of their questions before they even get there. Like, you can start at 3 or 4 talking about melanin and skin color. You know what I mean? Because they're going to notice there's a difference. So like my little boy just ate this up, like learning the places that are closer to the equator, they needed more protection from the sun. It's called melanin. And like he learned about his grandpa being from Jamaica. And then his other grandpa comes from Switzerland and they're as light as anything. You know what I mean? And it like clicks and all of a sudden it has this purpose behind it. And they just see everyone almost as they see the diversity of nature, it just, it's beautiful. It has a purpose. I don't need to, worry
most
about
white
it.
people are trying to be more like you in the tanning bed, right?
But, we just simplify
Don't
these things
hate.
for our kids.
Yeah.
But it's funny you bring up like sex education, right? We talked about Kristen Hodson before the podcast.
Yeah.
And she talks about how like sex education is not teaching your kids about sex. It's about at they're 3 years old, teaching them the name of a body part
Yes.
and normalizing the name of the body part, because then it doesn't become taboo and it doesn't get tucked under the
Stigmatized.
rug.
Yes.
It's
So
That's
true.
funny. I hadn't made that correlation, but yeah, it's the exact same thing, right? Like you just have to have, and I think that's the hard thing is it just takes a little bit of effort.
Yeah.
It takes the conversation of having the conversation as opposed to just saying, oh, they'll figure it out.
But we can shrink it down too. Like, I'm going to drop a quote. I never get quotes. I'm so excited. This is hanging in my house.
Ready for this.
Thanks to my wife, of course. Mother Teresa, if you want to change the world, start inside your own home.
Yep.
Yes, we love
And
that.
that's like,
Yeah.
you talk about ripple effect, right? Like, we don't have to freak out about this. Like, just start, like, lift where you stand. Like, just start at home.
Yeah.
Like, start
Yeah.
with the skin color discussions with different color Barbies. Like, just, we can create diversity in our own house. Luckily, a lot of the shows and stuff we watch, they're kind of doing that for us, which is
Yeah.
also really, really good. You don't ever really see TV shows anymore that just have a bunch of like Mickey Mouse Club white kids running around, right? There's everything,
Yeah.
So I've never understood why we don't have more diversity in Utah. I mean, maybe it is the LDS thing. Like, we just don't have, I don't know. Do you guys have any opinion
I
on that?
do.
What is
I
it?
do.
Well, I'm really curious to hear this.
So
It sounds like it's a juicy opinion.
it is.
The face
It
you just
is.
made.
And I feel like I can't speak for the past. I mean, obviously we know the history of this state and the Mormon pioneers and why they came here. And I think that was a big part of it. But you also have to look into the church's history and some of the things surrounding Black people too. And then I think with the location of where we are in the West, like we're not near the ocean or the water, and sometimes there's more diverse jobs for that. But I feel like what I'm hearing now currently with my Black friends is it's not a safe place to raise your kids.
Interesting.
And it's hurting companies. We've been in the national news, and tech companies suffer when they cannot recruit diversity. There was even a Harvard study. It brings in money, diversity of thought, ideas, backgrounds, especially like innovation, all of that.
Better food, better culture, better everything. Like I go to New Orleans a lot.
Yeah.
I love it. Like it just, I don't know what it is. Like maybe it's the weather,
New Orleans too. Yeah.
But it's just like there's very few. I spent a lot of time in Chicago. Like Black people live where Black people live. White, like Polish people live where Polish people. Like it was so segregated. But New Orleans, it's like there are definitely some like tough spots, right, where there's no white people living, of course. But for the most part, like everybody really meshes. Mm-hmm. Like you go to the Superdome on a Sunday for a Saints game, and it is just. It's the best.
Yeah.
Like there's just every race, every culture, every food. Everyone is so cool to each other. And it just, man, it makes me like, I struggle with here a little bit. And I struggle with my kids growing up here.
Well, I mean,
because I want them to have that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But just to echo what Alexis is saying, it's Utah has a really strong established culture.
Yeah.
Based on religion, based on, the history of the state. And how do, in specific, Black people fit into that culture? It's been hard.
Yeah.
And when she says it's not safe for our Black and brown children, it's that they don't, that need of belonging, they're not getting that as strong here because we do, it's sort of like this cycle. We lack diversity, but yet we can't get it because we're not creating that safe environment, and it perpetuates the other.
Yeah.
Well, and I love
It's like
that
chicken
you
and the egg,
have
right?
grown
Yeah,
up in places where you see the benefit of diversity.
Totally.
Right.
Not everyone has, though.
No.
Right.
Some people think it's going to bring down the property value. It's going to bring in more crime. Like, there's fears that people have, or I won't know my neighbors or trust them, or, things like that. And trying to hold space from that perspective is, I think it's sometimes lack of experience, or maybe having a negative experience that then you apply to all experiences. But there's more diversity coming. I do believe a lot of these big companies here.
We're improving.
But what I've seen in the last probably 2 years is people come and then leave. And
Really?
that's what's really hard.
That's tough.
Oh, okay. That's really sad.
Well, do you know what else is funny? Is like Black culture, like all the music our kids listen to, like trends.
Yeah.
It's so funny that it's such a struggle, yet everything about Black culture is what is pop culture. I mean, it's what
It's
drives
influence,
fashion,
everything.
what drives music.
Yeah.
It's
it
such
really-
a weird.
Well, and I think sometimes people think, like, with good intentions, like, well, look at what's popular. Black people are doing fine. Look at the athletes. Look at all this.
Oh,
you know?
yeah. No.
But it's like, no, we have to go a little deeper than that. But yes, there is a cool cultural influence. And if it really stems back, and that's what's so
stems back to like blackface and, taking that culture for, gain and entertainment.
Well,
it's really interesting.
And we're talking about like 0.1% of 1% that, because you're right. Like a lot of people that grow up, a lot of these Black kids that grow up like in the South, it's like they really do think like I've got drugs, rap, or sports.
Yep.
That's my only way.
Those are
out.
my outs.
And the chances, there's a reason why so many of them go to gangs and drugs because, becoming a pro athlete, making any money in music or athletics is like fat chance, you know what I mean? And so like that has to change.
It does.
Yeah.
It really does.
It's interesting to hear that. So Silicon Slopes was a couple of weeks ago. I was up there, and Ryan Smith and Dwayne Wade were up there talking.
Yeah.
And Dwayne was talking about, so the question was asked, like, as a player, like, how do you view Utah? Like, why did you choose Utah, right? Like, why not New York or Miami? Because he had opportunities to have ownership in different franchises. And he talked about, like, as a player, he's like, here's our experience in Utah. he said, it's not that we didn't feel, this is what he said. He's like, it's not that I didn't feel safe, but I didn't feel welcome.
Right.
He's like, so I'd come to the airport, I'd go to the hotel, and I'd go to the arena. We never went out to eat as a team. We would never go into the city.
Jeez.
He's like, but this was every NBA team. So this is all of the NBA players' experience with Utah is the inside of the arena, the inside of the hotel, and the airport. He's like, that's the extent of what I knew Utah. And so what he was saying, it brought me a bunch of hope. I'm less hopeful now after hearing you talk. But he was like, the Utah I know now is not the Utah that is not the perception, right? He's like, Ryan has taken me out and we've experienced, the people, and we've experienced some of the culture, and we've experienced the outdoors. And he's like, I love this place. But then something else that Ryan said that really stood out was, he's like, D, like, you're not going to have any impact on Miami. He's like, D, you're not going to change New York. He's like, you can change Utah.
Yeah.
True.
That's so
and
true.
like, that was like so impactful to me. But it's cool too to see like Ryan taking lead in this, right? Like, and it's been sad to see like the scholarship thing, they gave scholarships to kids and he got so much crap because he didn't give a scholarship to a white kid. Yeah. And it's just like, for real?
That's where the equity stuff comes in.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's where we're going
conversation.
With this. Like that's
give me a
that's
break.
your issue.
Yeah.
But anyways, I love that we have people who are at least having conversations and are taking leads. And anyways, that was a really cool thing for that.
Yeah.
That was like my favorite thing from Silicon Slopes was hearing. Now I'm a jazz nerd to the max. So, I mean, that's all.
Oh, so you're racist?
Whole separate thing, But like, it was really cool to hear those guys talk about why they're doing what it is. And like, even Ryan said, he's like, they feel this huge responsibility to represent and change. Like, and they have an opportunity to change Utah. He even said, like, we're the only team that wears their state on our chest. He's like, every team, it's the city.
That's cool.
Yeah.
He's like, Utah is the only team that it's the Utah Jazz, not the Salt Lake City Jazz. He's like, we represent the state. And he like, you can tell that he feels that weight.
Yeah.
And it's really cool.
Well, and I feel like they both have had big impact.
Massive.
And it's nice to know, especially when we're like the little people down here, and you feel like you're working so hard trying, but to see that represented on higher levels too.
Yeah.
And I feel like, Donovan Mitchell, he has
Donovan's
really
been amazing.
stepped into a lot of situations that he didn't have to.
Correct.
And
I hope he stays. Oh
That's
my
and
gosh.
I do too.
Because he's
I
going to
do.
change. Like
And
the ability to impact a whole area.
But see, that's where you also see how real the problem is.
Correct.
Because you look at the replies to his tweets.
I know.
It's
Isn't it
sick.
Like,
sick.
It's
we don't
crazy.
read comments anymore.
Yeah.
It's harmful.
Yeah.
We just
our
can't.
mental health.
I don't read Yelp, and I just have a restaurant. I don't deal with like being
exactly.
black. Like,
Yeah.
You
I
just,
can't even read freaking Yelp.
you gotta
like, I
just
can't even
keep plowing
imagine.
forward. Yeah.
What it would be like. But again, that's self-care, right? Like, you got to know
It
the
is.
limit.
It is.
This might open up a whole other can of worms, so we can take this to episode 2. But are you guys LDS?
Yes.
We are.
We are.
How do you balance that? Because, our history is really interesting because, it's pretty well documented that Joseph Smith talked out against slavery. But then we kind of went the other direction.
Yeah. Quick
And
U-turn there.
It's hard. My uncle is one of the main directors for all the LDS motion pictures. And, we're going to have him on the podcast. And we talked this morning, and he told me some stories that were hard to hear about some pretty like high ups in the church. And I'm like, how do you keep a testimony when like some of these people that we revere are total pain in the necks to deal with and not very nice people. And, he even said, he's like, I'm not going to be working for the church much longer because if I do, it might take a toll that's too big to come back from. And so I just want to be kind of a rank and file member again. And I just can't help but think like, how do you balance that, the past, and not let it affect where you are in the present?
I think my wish is that it was more open. There's so much that I feel like maybe I shouldn't say this, but that's swept under a rug.
For sure.
And we're left to just know bits and pieces. And I believe that humans by nature are complex characters, and we can look at really great people in history, even like Martin Luther King Jr., or we look at people like Thomas Jefferson that people revere so much, and they have a really complexity about who they were and their morals and all of these different things and the things they did.
You can love the ladies and still be a good person, is what you're saying.
I'm just saying that, like, I legitimately wish that we could just be open about the history of the church and let us understand
without shame and judgment and
that
blame.
These men
That's what the
did
atonement
some
is,
really
right?
awful things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that we can still focus.
And that's okay to say.
On Christ.
It
We
is.
can still
Yes.
focus on Christ and know that there were a lot of screwy problems happening as the church was building and growing. And I think that would be healthy.
And I think it's okay to say it about it now.
Yeah.
I think it's
think so too.
okay to say, I don't like this about it. And it's okay.
Yeah. And just acknowledging those things, I think, is beneficial. And it's a journey. It's
Well, and
hard.
It's hard sometimes because, of course, everyone wants us to do church stuff, and we haven't wanted to.
What do you mean
And-
by church stuff?
Like they want us to talk about the priesthood ban. I mean, blacks in the
show
priesthood
up,
and all
do
these
this
things.
Fireside. Let's
Look, we
do
only
this.
have
Let's
the
do this
priesthood
church
to make
project.
us feel like sort of cool like women.
Sort of.
Like you guys have all the power. We just have a title. Let's be honest. But no, it's like I wouldn't do that. Like that's
Well, we don't want
that's-
to touch it because we don't feel like that the church has done enough to really create
Right.
resources and tools that we can have the conversation
Not enough
without it just
dialogue.
being
Yeah.
opinion, you
Yeah.
know?
Yep.
And it's tricky because we really hold space and honor all that we know that have left. And we listen, we don't judge. And the fact that we've chosen to stay doesn't mean that everything is sunshine and lollipops, you know?
Yeah.
But there's reason enough that we feel like we should. And that's a whole other space that I feel like there's a demand for us to speak in and show up in. And sometimes we have to be choosy on what we can do. And it gets tricky.
Just like it's really helped me learning about a lot of the Black Mormon pioneers. Because just as, you know, our church gained so much pride and momentum from learning about their family history, for me, it changed my world, really understanding Jane Manning's story and learning all these people's stories and their faith and the level of faith they had when they didn't have like the blessings of the priesthood and things like that in their life. And for me, it's been like, okay, we have problems. There are a lot of cultural issues within our church. We have issues, but can I focus and make this a Christ-centered religion for me? You know, and so it's been a process, but that's kind of where I'm at right now. Yeah.
Well, and you know, the world changes.
Yeah.
You know, you have to give people the grace for where they are in the world, right? We look back at like Mountain Meadows Massacre, for example, like that's a tough one, but you've got all these people that have been hunted and killed for
Yeah.
years. And so it's like now we're in this safe place and there's people coming through. Like it's not justified, but you have to at least be able to have that discussion. Like we don't know it. You can't compare something that happened then to something that's happening right now. Like you have to give them grace for where they are, but why can't we talk about it?
Exactly.
Like,
I know.
what it
that's
is
all
for
I'm
me. It's
saying.
like,
just open this up.
Because here's my opinion. We can't talk about it because it's all or nothing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're
We
right.
can't say, we can't give them grace and be like, okay, I understand, but that was wrong.
Right.
Like those two things like don't go hand in hand in our world today. Like
Yeah.
we don't
Well, you
allow
can't speak truth. You have to make you have to say what's right publicly, right? Even though like what we need to have is why can't we have the conversations that we can have privately, publicly, and not be worried
and
about.
part is because I gotta go back to it. It's because both things are true, and we have a hard
True.
time with that.
True.
We have a hard time
That
agreeing
they
that
don't
both
have
things
to
are
be
true.
mutually
That's right.
exclusive. We can take both things. You're right. That is so hard for us, especially in today's world.
Yeah.
Well, and that's
Yeah.
like what I want to teach my kids is I want my kids to be able to see people as for their strengths, their weaknesses, the good, the bad.
flaws,
some of the greatest leaders, there's a dark side.
For sure.
And I feel like I want to be able to learn and talk about both of those and the good they did and maybe the harm that was done too. And I feel like right now, like kind of like what you guys were saying, like we know what we know, but like what would we have thought 100 years ago, because we're all influenced by the culture, by who we're around, our family's beliefs. Like, so sometimes I feel like that's really humbling to think about that and think like, you know, what would I have been a part of? What wouldn't I have been a part of?
Well, it goes back to your anxiously curious comment, because I find myself asking the question right now, like, was this priesthood ban since the beginning, or were there any black people that got the priesthood and then somebody changed it for some reason?
And they carried on. So Elijah
I've
Abel.
never looked into that.
Elijah Abel had the priesthood. He was, you know, and then it was passed on. It was all the way into, I think, the 1920s, because his son and his grandson were able to get it. But when the change happened, they still had it. You know what I mean? And,
yeah, it's not like you can take that away.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. There's actually a great website that shows the timeline.
Was it Brigham Young? Brother Brigham?
Brother Brigham.
But the thing is, it's called like blacklds.org, and it's actually like some very well-known black
timeline. It's really insightful.
White professors, and you'll see the timeline of all of that, and it's really fascinating. But it's stuff that people don't know. But that's a great question. Look at you getting anxiously curious.
Yeah,
thank you.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, no, I'm fascinated. So Porter Rockwell's like what I've read every book known to man.
Yeah.
I think he's one of the most interesting characters in our, you know, LDS world. But talk about swept under the rug. Like, nobody talks about him anymore. And this guy, like, I mean, he did so many things. Like, he was the most selfless, like, loyal. I mean, he did so much for the early church. And he was even told in the prophecy, it was Samson, like, if you cut your hair, like, you will not die as long as you don't cut your hair.
Yeah.
But he had so much compassion on a woman who had, you know, all of her hair fell out. Her husband left her. And he cut off all of his hair so they could make a wig for her. And he died like less than a year later.
Crazy.
Like, but because of the Mountain Meadows Massacre and some of the, you know, this guy was a rough dude.
A rough guy, yeah.
But, I mean, those were rough times.
They were.
And so it's like, it's sad that we have this, I mean, you take like all the most famous like gunslingers in the West, combine them, and this guy shot more people than all of them combined. Like, but he did it protecting what he believed in, and it's sad. It's sad that
we don't give the grace to people that we ask
like,
for it in return.
Well, we're so worried about offending people
true.
now, and so it's like I've never heard the name Jay Manning. Like I wrote
And
that
look
down.
up Elijah Abel.
Elijah Abel.
He was the first black man to have the priesthood. And Joseph Smith was alive during that time, so you know.
It's interesting. It really is interesting.
I spend a lot of time in Nauvoo, like almost half my year, it feels like.
Really?
And
Why?
I'm going somewhere else. I choreograph for the church. I do all the dances for the missionaries in Nauvoo. And I guess it's hard for me because there are so many stories that are untold there. Yeah. And every year I go, I just have this nagging feeling like there's so much more, you know, that we need to be showing.
Maybe the Lord wants us to tell those stories, you guys to tell those stories. Maybe it's not the general authority's job to tell those stories. Like, those are your stories, right?
Yeah.
Like, until we get some, like, American-born, like, black general authorities up there, which
hopefully next year, I'm hoping.
It's, you're seeing a lot more diversity in the general authorities. It seems to be more from, like, internationally.
Yeah.
But it's... I think that God doesn't, I really truly believe that it's, sometimes it needs to be more grassroots.
Yeah, and
that can make a bigger difference. And sometimes we judge the church for not doing it when maybe they're not doing it because it's our job. I don't know.
It's interesting. I have so much respect for Mally Bonner in this because that is what I feel like he's been dedicating his life to lately, is just sharing these stories. And what he's done with Greenflake has been
But what a cool
amazing.
calling. Like, what a cool
It is. You just wish you
legacy.
had the financial backing of the church.
Right.
Yeah.
You know,
well, and that's what's hard because it's these people out here giving
their life,
their own paychecks, their life to these things to make a mark in history for our kids. Like Mally's whole desire to have this monument of Black pioneers is so all our babies and your babies too can hear these stories and see it represented, because it's not right now. And so I feel like sometimes it's hard for us because, we want to show up and share these stories, but sometimes it's exhausting. And then there's pushback. And sometimes we don't have the connections and funding. And I feel like so many people that we are connected to, it's like we're all using our own paychecks to sometimes do this bigger mission, and it burns out. You can only do so much without support of community and sometimes just money,
Right.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Well, and relationships.
Yeah.
I mean, my uncle tells the same stories. Like there is a bureaucracy there, and that's just human nature. Like if people knew half the freaking stories about BYU, it's funny when you were talking about your stories, it's like the only way I can relate to what you were saying about how you know information that you can't tell is BYU athletics. It's like I hear people on Twitter like talking about what they know, and I'm like, oh, if you only knew. Like, right. And I'm not necessarily saying all negative things either. Like
there are just
they
things.
know, but they don't know.
Yeah.
But I can't say anything, right?
Yep.
But it all falls back though to atonement.
Yeah, it
and
does.
That we are all flawed, and that we
lead
have
with grace
to figure.
and love.
Yeah, we have to figure it out, and we have to help each other figure it out. And God's not just going to come down and do it for us. He's not going to, as much as we want the church to maybe get involved. Like again, we are the church.
That's true.
And so this right here, maybe this puts a little more money towards what Molly's trying to do.
Yeah.
And we'll get there. Cause I had no idea. I've never even heard of it until right now, but I'll definitely be looking into it. Cause what a special thing.
Yeah. Well, right? And I think it's a great thing to talk about with your family, Yeah. And to watch together.
I've never thought of church Black history. Like I've never even thought to look into that.
Yeah.
Right.
And I won't lie, it's a little harder to find things.
Well, I'm sure, but because, the more we look, though, like
yes, exactly.
The more the one person, a BYU professor, whoever that has access to be able to dig a little deeper, or has access to the vault, that where the microfilm it.
When you're hearing a lot of those stories, there's quite a few people that we follow, and they're older, and they've just been sharing these stories that they've probably talked about for years, but people weren't really interested in, and it's interesting. Like even just the perspective of the first 3 Black men to attend BYU, I got to hear that story.
Wow.
I
when was that?
Believe it. It was back, I can't remember the date, but Jarius Gray, who's one of them, and he was also in the presidency of Genesis, which I don't know if you guys are familiar with Genesis, but it's a group that Black saints pretty much went to the prophet at the time and said, if we can't have the priesthood, there's really not a place for us. We need to find a place that we can support each other.
Have community.
And so they were set apart. There was a president and 2 counselors, and it's still going today. It's in Salt Lake.
What?
We get to clap.
Hold on, say what?
We get to clap.
Yes, we do.
At church?
There's a gospel choir.
I found my new word.
And so it's once a month, Genesis, and the history of it.
It's Sunday evenings, though.
Yes, but your kids get to go to primary, and they actually get to learn Black history. And this is here in our state, and it's for Black members of the church, but you go, and it's a community. There is every color there.
It's like Polynesian words, man. Like,
but why the crap is that not
so much better
known and out in every...
Well,
that should be done. Honestly, how cool would it be to do that at the conference center once a month?
Yeah.
So everybody can come.
Well, we did do it once, and it was a really big deal. You guys can actually go watch it. And Genesis just had their 50th anniversary, and it is on the church's website, and it will share their history. There's music, gospel choir. But those are really the only 2 things that we've seen probably in the past decade.
Yeah.
Let me just remind everybody else of something. No Black people, no barbecue.
For real.
I'm saying I don't have my job. Seriously.
Yeah.
Like pit barbecue, like that's like slavery days. Like
it is.
taking
It is.
the worst cuts of meat, digging a hole.
Soft. Yeah.
Like
all the soul food has a story. Yeah.
Well, one of my favorite chefs, I can't remember his name right now, Husk in Charleston, South Carolina. I've got his book right down there, but his whole entire purpose for living right now is finding the heirloom rice, corn, all the stuff brought over from Africa. Yeah. And he is really trying to celebrate the cuisine that the slaves gave us and the mark that they left on the South. Mm-hmm. And he is actually digging up these heirloom seeds that still exist with a lot of work to find and reproducing them. And now you can buy them. Like I bought rice and grits that can directly be connected to the stuff that came from overseas that the slaves grew to feed themselves with.
That is cool.
Isn't that amazing?
That is, yeah.
So I'm really mad that his name's, I'll tell it to you afterwards, but he wants to tell that story, and that's a white guy. And I think that's really, it's like what you've said, Andrew, like the change really is going to, like, it's us listening and then us. Well, it's the quote, us doing better with the knowledge that we have.
Yeah.
And that's this church history stuff, though. It's got me. I'm really excited to look into that.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It is.
Like, that's really, really cool. And that's a great segue into, using the culture that we have here to get people to wake up a little bit.
Yeah.
Well,
Right?
finding the good and using it and
Totally.
acknowledging it. So
Well, and there's so much good.
So much.
There is so much
Yeah,
good.
I
Yep.
agree.
Well, I want to read journals of any black member that didn't leave the church, like why they stayed, how that must have been, like what that felt like, right?
Yeah, I might be able to help you out with that.
That would be so fascinating to read. Like, you talk about a testimony.
That's always what I say. Like, what faith?
Yeah.
Well, and that's a
Yeah.
story of faith that it's not just for the black members. I mean,
100%.
hearing that and hearing like, what were you up against? You weren't even treated the same in your congregation. Your family couldn't be sealed in the temple, and you still believed in the true and simple gospel of Jesus Christ.
I mean, we talk about the pioneers.
Jeez.
You add
Yeah.
a whole different level of inside, and you still choose to stay, right?
Well, that's a
Yeah.
personal relationship with Christ. Like, that's what it is. Like,
Yep.
It is.
you don't let the church, like, we have to stop thinking that the church is this cookie cutter black and white. Like, you can create whatever you want to create for you. Like, you are your own person. God sent you here just the way that you are.
Yeah.
And you don't have to like everything, and you don't even have to believe everything. Like, you can make it yours. You know what I mean? Make it yours. Like, get your relationship with Christ and do what you can do. Like, big deal.
Amen to that.
So anyway, you guys are amazing.
So how can people support you in what you're doing? As everyone listens, you guys you're amazing. So how can we help you? How can we support what's going on?
That's a great question because we have our hands in quite a few things right now. We are working on several courses.
Okay.
One will be for parents and teachers and schools. It's kind of a mini little Black history curriculum that we worked with Dr. LaShawn Williams on. And then we're doing one that's for church members too. And those will come out. And
cool.
I feel like showing up to our events.
Yeah. Follow us on Instagram so you can keep up with
What we're doing.
Do you have a website?
We do not yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're just little Instagrammers over
You're looking
here.
at us like we're judging you.
Yeah.
Have you seen Bam Bam's website? I am not judging you.
So, we have an emailing list. That
Okay.
is one thing, but we just try to keep people kind of updated on things they can
projects
do.
and-
We love to send out tips on what you can talk to your kids about. We love recommending books, children's books. And then I just feel like when we have an event or a workshop, when people show up, when sponsors come in and want to sponsor and work together and collaborate, it just makes our work so much easier.
Okay.
You guys
Yeah.
ever do firesides or anything like that?
We just flew to
did one in
Seattle.
Seattle.
Did one a couple
Really?
weeks ago. Yeah.
That's cool.
Are you wanting to speak more? Like if people are listening, like, hey, I want you. Like, is that something you're?
I mean, we're
your
going to have
point.
some guidelines for you, but I'm just kidding.
Right.
So-
and then we
to
get all
your point
raged
Will you
about
let
being
me be your
busy,
agent,
doing
please?
everything
Yeah,
right. Like,
we love.
listen,
speaking.
Karen.
We do love
absolutely
speaking.
love. We've done some keynotes for some big conferences and conventions, and we love it. But
We were on
Right
C-SPAN
now-
when we were 15.
yeah,
No
we're
big deal.
kind of shutting down for the next couple of months just to build out these courses.
Yep.
But then as of next year, we'll be back speaking
Enjoy
again.
some
Yeah.
holiday time.
And we love it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
family.
Yes.
Good time to take a break.
Yep.
The
Our
kids.
babies are like, maybe Let's Talk Sis is getting a little too big.
I know.
See, that's, I wonder, like, are your kids, what ages are, like, how old are your oldest kids?
Yeah.
I have 12 down to
3.
yeah,
Between the two of us. Yeah.
Like, I wonder if that will be kind of a, like, why do you have to speak up? It's making it weird. Like, I wonder if you'll ever have to deal with that.
It's
hope
kind
not.
of both for my kids. Like they'll be like, Mom, go on your Instagram and talk about this. I need my friends'
Oh, that
moms
is
to talk
really
to their
cool.
kids, Mom. So it's like they love it. But then we get recognized a lot of places, and sometimes they get attention they don't love.
Yeah.
And sometimes it just is kind of like, I don't know if I like that part of it. And then there are times too, my kids are like, it's a fine line. Like, am I making it better or worse for them? You know?
Yeah.
So it's definitely interesting. But I feel like when they're involved, it's awesome. And
That
so
is
we
way
have to
cool that
involve them and
the fact
connect
that they
them.
come to you guys and
Yeah.
like, will you talk about this right now?
Yeah.
Because that's so relevant because they're in school right now.
They are.
And 12 years old, they're coming up on the worst
Yeah.
part of
Well,
school,
and they
middle school. Like,
recognize sometimes people just don't understand, you know? And so if we can have a conversation,
Right.
then it's going to help things.
Kids are brilliant.
They are.
they are, and they're resilient, but they're little assholes too. I'm serious.
No, it's
like
true.
we just dealt with some drama with middle school with, I won't say, but kid. Like, but it was just rumors being spread,
Yeah.
and she had heard it, and it was a really bad rumor. And we're talking, 12 to 14-year-old.
Detrimental for these.
And, we got some parents involved, and it's crazy what these little bastards come up with. And so
true.
it's hard.
It is. It's hard.
And we would love to have you back soon because I really did want to talk about the Davis County stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have any openings
Important
next couple
stuff
weeks,
right
but
now.
Yeah, well,
I
I
think we
would.
would-
I feel like right now, kind of like what I said.
You need
I
to,
mean, my
like,
phone's
cool
going off.
down a little bit.
There's a lot that I just need to make sure I know what I can say.
Right.
Yeah.
And so even a
Yeah,
couple
so it
weeks,
probably would be better
Yeah.
in like 2 weeks from now
That it
because
would-
there's
Well, and
so
we-
much surfacing.
And we all need to, like, I'm even guilty of it. Like we talked before you came on, I'll just be honest, like you read it and it does. Like the hard part is it's a minor and you have to protect the privacy of the minor. So it's just like the whole article is like just, it feels, when people read it, and this is, I'm just being real,
Yeah.
like it feels very like witch hunt. Like they are just after the teacher's evil, the district's evil.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard because I think that it is very easy, especially we're talking about the marketing again, right?
Yeah.
Like where it all feels like the media has just made it such a divisive thing. Yeah. It's so hard to, I think what a lot of people are probably will say guilty of is just not reading it. Like they see the headline and just like,
It's so sad because what's divisive about a 10-year-old little girl?
And I get that. I'm just being real.
I know.
Like
No,
it's,
I'm
it's-
agreeing with you. I'm just saying it's
Well,
so
and
sad
see,
that
this-
But
that
that's
is
why this is a
divisive.
great
Yeah.
platform to have, like, because we have people listening to this that it can be presented in a way where it's not just media trying to keep you locked into the story and trying to make it.
Well, there's no narrative. There's no
there's
agenda.
Yes. And
Yeah.
and unfortunately in the media there generally is. And so
an
people don't
agenda,
know
yeah.
what to believe. And I think it's important. Not important is the understatement of the century. Like we have to talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because this is Davis County. Like Davis County
right
is
here.
like Utah County.
Yeah.
I mean, it is like white Mormon. You would never think in a million
the thing
years.
is, like we've known this for years. Like,
Right.
I've heard the stories. I was reached out by some of these moms reached out to me a couple years ago.
2018.
And so it's like for us, it might be new news to other people, but we've been hearing these stories and they're just swept under the rug. And it
it's
doesn't
so
mean the
sad.
whole district's bad or
No.
every person.
And I think that's the
but there are
problem
some
is we think it's
crucial
like-
things that we need to fix
Yes.
and figure out. And so it's good to hear like how people are taking and responding because
perceive
even
it.
us, our community, our world, the information we know, it's a different conversation than maybe
Yeah.
your world. And it's important, I think, that I want to know. I don't know
Yeah.
what people think. And,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it's important to hear that.
Yeah.
Because it's not that people don't want to take it seriously. It just, the way that things get written and the
Yeah.
headlines get written, it just feels like more of the same divisive stuff. And it's like, but this one is different because when you read 10-year-old black autistic,
Right.
anything suicide next to a 10-year-old, like what in the hell is happening? Like this is you can't run away from this one.
Right. And it's like,
And
we can't let this happen again.
Well, and there's-
so what do we have to do
Well,
to
and
come
we
into
need-
the situation?
For lack of a better word, like we need to take advantage of this being such a hard-hitting story.
So we can do better.
Yes.
So
I mean,
we can
and
do
Because
better.
people are going to listen.
That's
Yeah.
history. Unfortunately, that's history.
That's Emmett Till.
We have Emmett Till,
Oh,
which was
man.
the catalyst to like the civil rights movement, and we have all of these traumatic events that have happened that literally wake us up, and we have to let it wake us up. You know?
Well, and it's hard because every situation's complex. There's always so many factors and things, but it comes to like taking accountability and also like, what does it look like? Sometimes I don't feel like we model enough. What does doing better look like?
Yeah.
What does redemption look like? What is owning and saying this was wrong? And I mean, it's all so extreme. Like what,
But what's sad is it's not like, I think that maybe we make like us as, white people, like it's what we need to do. I don't think anyone's asking for too much. It's not even a lot. It's just acknowledgement and an improvement. It's not even like, I think there's this whole thing with like, you hear the word reparations, right? Like, oh man, they just want to like,
They just
cash in for what happened before and blah, 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 blah. Although one reparation thing just happened that I thought was badass.
I get what you're talking about.
Manhattan Beach,
I think so.
the Bruce family,
I don't.
all that beachfront property that was stolen from them, and they just gave it back to their family. Yeah. We're talking like hundreds of millions in property value. Right on the water.
Yeah. It's amazing.
These were freed slaves that bought the land with their own money and made it a place for other freed slaves to come and have a safe place to live. Had it ripped out from them under them in like the 20s or 30s.
Yep. Which was happening all the time. During that time
and
period.
I'm so floored that they actually gave it back. That's an awesome story.
Well, and even reparations, that's something I did not even understand.
Yeah.
And then I understood, and it has opened my eyes. But you have to dig back into history and
See, that's
40
the thing.
acres and a mule. And, you got to
Totally.
go
Yeah.
there.
It's not just about like, I think the media has kind of portrayed it as like reparations. They just want money. Like, you look at like Indian reservations, right? I'm sorry. You live on an Indian reservation, you better get paid. You deserve it, right? But it's like when you actually put a story to it, like the Bruce family.
Yeah.
These aren't reparations. This is just doing what's right.
It is.
Like their family, their ancestors are still in California. Like that is their property.
Yeah.
Straight up.
Yeah.
Like the deed in hand.
We're not asking you to do anything. Just be a
Just
good
do
human.
what's
I know.
honest.
I know.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
all
Just be a good
we're not
human.
asking that much.
No, well, and that to
But
my
sometimes
point.
until you hear the stories, people can't humanize it enough
Yes.
right.
to feel that way.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Well, we blow it up in our heads because of media, because of whatever else.
Well,
right?
even just
Like,
beliefs of the past. Like
Yes.
I even feel like things that were explained to me
Yeah.
from a very one-sided perspective, and then I see another, and I was like, "Oh, whoa, that's totally different than what I thought."
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and with the white and the black, like it's funny. J. Cole, I love J. Cole. He's like, but I love that he tells the black side of his story. Like you listen to his music, there's so much depth to what he talks about real stuff, but he doesn't shy away from the fact that he's white too. But he's like, but I have this platform. I'm using it.
Right.
It's so cool, and it's the same thing that you guys are doing, and it's a huge, like you said, it's a huge responsibility, and I couldn't do it. I don't think most men could do it. Doesn't matter what color they are. Sorry, Brandon. Sorry, Brandon.
Men.
Brandon, you would totally punch someone, just like I would. But we're all blessed because you guys are doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
I can't promise we'll do it forever, but for this season,
Right.
Everything
feel like
has
it's
a
what
season.
we need
Yeah.
to be doing.
Everything has a season.
Yeah.
It's very like timing wise, it's needed, right?
Yeah,
like
it is.
the momentum's there. We got to keep up with the momentum because even I'm guilty of like we talked about, like I said before, we had this amazing talk with Tim and Yahosh, but it's like you read enough media and you just get kind of immune to it, like it's easier to just kind of like
I think that is the issue, and it takes like reconnecting to the individuals who are living and experiencing these
And
things
that's the
because
key right
the
there.
media does.
Yes.
It desensitizes
Well, and right
us.
now
It makes
there's
us want to be
so
like,
much.
Desensitized.
There's just
That's
no more.
the
We
word
don't
I
want
was
this.
looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think our bodies were made to take in all of this intense information all the time.
Right.
And so
It doesn't have to be as intense all the
or
time,
as
right? Like
negative.
you can have positive, uplifting conversations. Like they don't have to always be so heavy, although they will be.
Yeah.
They don't always have to be.
They
right?
don't.
Like connection doesn't have to be so heavy.
Yeah.
There's so many awesome, hopeful stories too. Like that's what I'm really excited about to dig in, because it's like we can learn from people. Like, I mean, any LDS person that stuck with it after the priesthood thing, like that's a Christ-like human being. Yep. Like that's the person I want to learn from.
Well, thank you guys so much for coming on. We are doing a 2.0.
Okay.
We would love it.
We have
Get it in
to.
the calendar.
Yes.
We're doing it. Everyone go follow them at Let's Talk Sis on Instagram.
Yeah, it's Let's Talk _sis.
There we go.
Yep.
So that's where we're going.
Until we find the person that has the other one.
I know.
right?
Get it from
We're
them.
going to get it. Yep.
But thank you so much. This has been amazing. You guys are incredible. Thank you for being willing to come down here and chat with us.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you both.